Hello everyone, Carl from the RQA office here. Like I've put, I'm the conference manager. We'll be just replaying some presentations this afternoon from some of our sponsors in a moment. So we're grateful to all the sponsors at the for the RQA conference for supporting us. We really appreciate it. So you'll see 3 presentations as the afternoon goes on. The first one is by Fabrizio from Sparta Systems, a Honeywell company. That's called Survival of the Fittest, a Darwinistic take on the evolution of quality. I think that's just over an hour. Then there'll be a little gap where I'll talk I'll put a video on. And then at 2:15, we're going to look at inspection findings. Maybe for the full title, what can we learn from them? How to analyze data and get the most from it. So that's Lovely and Millind from RiverArc. And then at 3:40 to finish off, 3 steps to compete in digital quality. That's from Kevin Ballard of Master Control. So I can see we've got lots of viewers across the different platforms. So this is live on the RQA website. This is live on LinkedIn. I can see on LinkedIn we have got a few people as well. So I've put comments. You can chat on LinkedIn. So if you are looking to speak to any other attendees, you can go on to LinkedIn and speak to people on there. It's also on our Vimeo channel where we've gone live, and we've also put it across to YouTube. So you can catch it everywhere. We're fairly omnipresent. And again, this is all about really talking about this year's conference. So just quickly before we start, just to let you know, the early bird does finish tomorrow. So you can get a discount on the price until the end of tomorrow. RQA 2023 starts in 8 weeks, just over 8 weeks. I went to the venue on Tuesday and Wednesday, really excited to have a look around and work out what we're doing. Make some really good plans to how we're going to make it a special event. Lots of new things going on this year. Our new to QA stream for anyone who is starting their quality journey is still open. We've still got a few places left in that cohort. We had a meeting this morning with the MHRA, and we've got a lot of stuff to come from regulators. We're excited to announce that the EMA will also be at our conference. So we've got the MHRA, the EMA, and the FDA, which we're incredibly grateful for. If you haven't yet, while the video is going on this afternoon, take a look at the website, take a look at the program. And if there's any questions, by all means, leave them on whatever platform you're on, or contact the office by email on conferences@therqa.com. If you've made your way here, no doubt you are looking forward to seeing the presentation. So to start off with, like I said, here's Fabrizio. These presentations were all taken from our virtual conference, which took place in May 2023. So let's make a start. Thanks for joining us today. Like I said, use the chat that you're on. I'll try and get across all the platforms, like I said, LinkedIn, YouTube. If you're on the RQA website, I don't think the chat function is on there, so you might, if you want to use it, you can navigate somewhere else. But if you have any issues, let us know, and I'll go with the first presentation.
Through his keynote presentation, Darwinistic take on the evolution of quality. So without further ado, I will pass you over to Fabrizio.
Thank you very much, Tim, and thank you for this introduction. And thank you to RQA for having me here again. Now, ladies and gentlemen, esteemed colleagues, and all who are passionate about the ever-evolving field of quality, I would also like to warmly welcome you to the 2023 International QA Virtual Conference. As Tim mentioned, my name is Fabrizio Maniglio. I am honored to receive you today or in the name of Honeywell Sparta Systems, as we delve into the labyrinth of quality, ethics, and innovation. An anecdote from my own life came to mind as I was thinking about this. I've always enjoyed cooking, and one day I was preparing some smoked ribs, and I ran out of barbecue sauce that the recipe was asking for. So rather than give up, I improvised and I used apple puree instead. And to my surprise, it was a hit. Now, this experience taught me that innovation often arises from necessity. And as such, adaptability is crucial in QA as it is in cooking. Because just as a chef in the kitchen, we in quality assurance have our ingredients, regulatory or regulations, technology and best practices. But really the magic lies in blending these, innovating and evolving, always striving for that Michelin star in our industry. So today we have an impressive lineup of speakers, each a master chef in their own right, ready to serve you a feast of knowledge and experience. The conference is divided into various tracks, as Tim mentioned, and each sounds more intriguing than the last. Each track a different flavor of a gourmet meal that is designed to give you a comprehensive understanding of that topic. As you can see on screen, the conference presentation topics, displayed here as a word cloud, highlight several keywords. While quality, of course, dominates the list, words like digital, system, future, and software stand out as well. Admittedly, I may be a little bit biased in noticing these keywords, but nevertheless, it's an insightful way of pinpointing the essential aspects of the conference theme. Now, as someone that really values both quality and technology, I believe that we must stay up to date with technological advancements. I distinctly recall when AI assistants such as Siri and Alexa were seen as the future of technology. However, the AI industry has rapidly expanded in recent months, revolutionizing our lives and transforming how we interact with information, pushing boundaries of what's possible. And I must say, it's impressive how advanced technology has become. I'm constantly amazed by how modern technology increases capabilities. In fact, most of the speech I've just given was generated by AI. And that's only a tiny window in what's to come. The possibilities that that new technology opens up is truly exciting to me and hopefully to you as well. So who knows what the future holds? As we embark on this gourmet adventure, I urge you to embrace the spirit of innovation, be open to new ideas, share your unique insights, and let's stir the pot together, combining traditional methods with a dash of innovation, a sprinkle of technology, and a large helping of passion. So with that, bon appetit, everyone, and let's start with the QA virtual conference of 2023. And as Tim already mentioned, this moves us over to my keynote speech, Survival of the Fittest, exploring the Darwinistic evolution of quality. Indeed, the QA landscape can be a jungle where only the fittest survive and thrive. Before we jump into the overall presentation, I wanted to take a few moments to talk a little bit about myself and also to express that this presentation is based on my own views and opinions and does not reflect or represent policies or positions of Honeywell International or its affiliates. But really, this is to say that I'm really a hopeless idealist at heart, and I do like to dream. And maybe for the next 50 minutes or so, I would like you to join me in dreaming a little bit as we discuss and discover where we've come from, where we are, and where we may be going. I want to start us off with just asking a question. If 5 frogs sit on a stone in the middle of the lake, and one decides to jump, how many frogs do you think are left on the stone? And I'm not going to reveal the answer to this question quite yet, but I will resolve it by the end of the presentation. When talking about the evolution of quality, it is worthwhile for us to stop for a moment and define the terms quality. And at the same time, I would like to define the term compliance. I found oftentimes in my career, those terms sometimes get confused or used as synonyms. And there are, to me, very distinct concepts. So I would like to share with you my definitions of both quality and compliance. And of course, you can agree with me, you can disagree with me. I'm happy to have a conversation in the Q&A sessions or after the presentation. So starting off with quality, I define quality as customer satisfaction, or at least a measurement for customer satisfaction. Whereas compliance, on the other hand, I define as a measurement for regulatory satisfaction. So on one side, we have a measurement for how happy the customer is with the service or product we provide. And on the other side, how happy our regulatory bodies are with the products we provide. With those definitions in mind, I would like to ask you, which one of these do you think is of higher quality or of higher compliance for that matter? And obviously, if I just show you these pictures of pillows and bricks, there's really no telling which one is of higher quality because, of course, neither quality nor compliance are inherent properties of the products that we see on screen. Quality really depends on, as we just saw, satisfaction. So how do we define satisfaction further so that we have an understanding of what factors play a role? And I would like to define satisfaction as perception divided by expectation. So think of perception as the perception of the product that you have in front of you. Perception tends to be fixed for the product that we hold because the product itself is not going to change. So our perception of it is not going to change. And of course, as we iterate products into the new generations, maybe the new products have a different perception than the previous line of products. But for the initial product, perception doesn't change. Expectation, on the other hand, changes very much. And expectation is based on a variety of different factors. Expectation is based on intended use, for sure. So it really depends on what I intend to use the product for that derives my expectations to that product. So am I getting or looking to get a good night's sleep? Or am I looking to build a house? Now, distinct intended use cases mean that I may be more or less happy with either of the products on screen, just based on their intended use. Additionally, expectations are influenced by the competition, by the status quo of what's expected of the industry or the product line. All of those drive our customer expectations, and it's a moving target. It constantly evolves. So with those two definitions straightened up and with an understanding of how we would measure satisfaction and therefore quality, what I want to do is look a little bit at the evolution of industry and quality. I want to focus on the evolution of quality, but I want to be helped by the evolution of the industry that went alongside the evolution of quality. So let's start with Industry 1.0. Or actually, let's start even a little bit before that. So let's start with where there was no industry. And what we did is we would manufacture or create products by just using craft. Each craftsman would craft the products, and the limiting factor was how quickly can I produce my product before I can get started on my next one. And then all of a sudden, we introduced or we discovered how to harness water and steam power. We started being able to build industrial infrastructure. We started being able to increase outputs by using these mechanical advantages. And we started focusing much more on performing tasks faster and more consistently. Hand in hand came Quality 1.0, where quality was mainly an afterthought, mainly assured through measurement and inspection after manufacturing of the products. And the volume of manufacturing was emphasized rather than quality. So we were all so excited that we were able to manufacture so much more, so much quicker, that we didn't really spend too much time thinking about quality. We also didn't think about waste or cost reductions in general. It was just amazing that we went from one at a time and very limited by human manufacturing potential to, hey, we can manufacture or we can perform tasks at scale. Then came Industry 2.0. this was the introduction of electrical power. And there is an interesting story or anecdote to be told there that is named the productivity paradox. Because when electricity first was introduced, there was no increase in productivity at all. And everyone was wondering, why is that? We introduced a new technology and it was hyped to be the next new thing, and nothing's changing. And the reason why nothing was changing back then is because we just took a new power source and we replaced an existing power source without changing anything else, without taking the new properties of that tool into account when changing the processes. Because really the main advantages of electrical power is we can scale motors up and down or rather efficiently, and we can position power sources where they make sense in the process rather than having to follow a steam line. And once those changes were introduced, of course, productivity gains were very visible. We started also being able to mass manufacture parts or machines that were then used in mass manufacturing, exponentially improving our productivity. And scale became broader as we could start varying those motor sizes to fit specific circumstances. Alongside Quality 2.0, now we started realizing, hold on, we're manufacturing so many things. We still want to be as productive as possible, but maybe it makes sense to introduce some minimal quality standards so that we have a minimal quality output, so that we don't have to focus that much energy on scrap and rework. And we started also measuring financial quality by measuring scrap and rework. And then came the age of computers, or at least programmable logical controllers. And with that introduction, we started being able to now use computer power to help with productivity, to help with communication, to help with information and exchange. And human participation started declining where standalone robotic systems could replace them. At the same time, now quality started becoming a business imperative. We started focusing much more on customer satisfaction and customer requirements. This was also around the time when ISO 9001 was introduced, focusing on customer satisfaction. Continuous improvement was applied, so we started entering the age of continual improvement, Lean, Six Sigma, and so on and so forth. And gains in productivity occurred by now stabilizing these new processes with these new robotic systems and standardizing the work. And then ultimately, we moved on to Industry 4.0. Now, it started quite a while ago, and now still we find ourselves in this pocket where we have integrated cyber-physical systems, automating work environments. We can automate processes to deal with end-to-end systems. And humans really started being used more and more in judgments and actions that cannot be automated or simulated, and everything else was started to be replaced by machines and by technology. Quality 4.0, on the other hand, now started using digitalization to optimize processes, use adaptive learning, support self-correction systems. And another shift that happened is quality started to shift more and more from operating and being process operators to being process designers. And we started talking more and more about quality by design. Machines learn to self-regulate and manage their own productivity and quality, and we start transitioning into that. But one of the things that I want to highlight, and the similarity between all these different steps, is that really human potential has always been the bottleneck in how efficient and how productive we can be. Initially, it was we have to do everything by hand. Then came a improvement in technology that helped us leap into the next evolution stage. And every time we were able to refine the processes to improve it gradually, but really where the jumps occurred were where we introduced new technologies that changed the paradigm that underlines how we can do things so that we could really frog leap into the next evolutionary stage. So to highlight that point, I do want to play a very short video for you. And this symbolizes our task is to empty this bottle into the container. And as we just use a normal technique in a normal process, it takes us roughly 16 seconds to empty this bottle into the container. Now, the next improvement is we could change the process, and we take the same bottle, but we swirl it and we create a little vortex to now change and empty the bottle in only 8 seconds. But it's only after introducing a new technology, in this case, a high-tech straw, that we can actually reduce the time even further and get it down to 4 seconds. So we went from 16 seconds with a normal process to improving the process to get down to 8, but then introducing a new tool that helps us change the way that the process can work to get it down to just 4 seconds. That's just again to highlight that introducing tools can actually help us do that frog leaping into the next evolutionary stage. So we just talked about these tools, in theory, technology in general, that can help us to break down those barriers, to help us scale our physical capabilities to the next stage. And one very important concept to consider here is that the tools are only as good as the trust that we give to those tools. Because let's take an example of this laser measurement device. Now, the device allows me to very quickly measure a room within seconds by just measuring all 3 axes. By standing still, I don't have to move. I can just quickly measure it from one corner. However, this is only valuable to me if I really trust the measurement. If I don't trust the measurement, I need to rely on a older technology to verify that that measurement is correct. Now I have introduced an additional step. I've also introduced additional work, and I don't use the new tool to its full potential. So it is really important to trust our tools. And that brings me to a book and a quote that I've been somewhat obsessed with of late, which is a book by David Allen called Getting Things Done. If you don't trust your systems, you can't let go of operational details, and you limit your ability to create at a bigger level. So it is really important to consider and to take into account that we need to trust the new tools that we choose to introduce so that they can help us to reach that next stage in our quality evolution. Speaking about evolution, let's talk a little bit about how Darwin defined the survival of the fittest. It is not the strongest of species that survives, nor is it the most intelligent that survives. It is the most adaptable to change. Now, that in itself sounds very logical until we realize that adaptable to change is very vague. So, which one of these would you rather be? All right. Now, of course, armed with the knowledge of history, we can safely assume that we should pick the possum over the T-Rex because we know what's going to happen. But that choice was not obvious at all back then, because at that point in time, we wouldn't have known what changes will happen and how we need to be adaptable to it. And that's further compounded by the speed of change we find ourselves in. Our world is constantly changing. And additionally, we see convergence of multiple megatrends that in themselves start amplifying themselves. And really, our world is a VUCAD world. And I'm sure you heard this term before. It stands for volatile, uncertain, complex, ambiguous, and now also digital. And in this uncertain world, there are a lot of changes that can happen. Some we may see coming, some we may not see coming. And we need to find ways to manage and become adaptable to be able to be considered the fittest and move on to the next evolutionary stage. And because we are faced with all these different disruptions, maybe it is helpful for us to establish a little mental framework on how to think of these types of events, disruptions, or changes that we may face so that we can classify them and then understand and maybe standardize how we may start dealing with the different types. So I'll suggest you my mental framework for this. We have a large area of things that we can predict. So these are things we can predict based on our data models, based on our experience, based on the past, based on signals that we may have that point to certain things happening. So these are all the things we can predict. From all the things we can predict, some of those things we can also prevent. Now, not all the things we can predict, we can also prevent. And there is also a large area of things that will just happen. Now, some of the things that we can predict will happen. Some of the things that will happen, we didn't predict or we couldn't predict. And with this graph in mind, I then started to think about and classify the individual types of events or disruptions that may happen. And how this started was a book by Nassim Taleb called The Black Swan that describes impact of highly improbable events. And by definition, black swans are not predictable. And the reason why is they represent a fundamental lack of knowledge. So we cannot predict black swans because we don't have the knowledge to even start asking the right questions to be able to predict them. And then I came across a different book called The Gray Rhino by Michelle Walker. And that, at least for this slide and for this mental model, solidified the metaphor that we're going to use, which is going to be based on animals. The gray rhino is a large animal that we see in the distance. We see it coming. We recognize that it represents danger, but sometimes we fail to act on it. Now, gray rhinos may be prevented sometimes. Other times they will happen. Even if we see them coming, sometimes we choose not to act on them, and that ends up being a mistake. Then a little bit to my own amusement, I introduced the albino rhino, not just because it rhymes, but also because it represents a different type of rhino that is much rarer. So this is a combination of rare events that we still may see coming, but it's much harder to prevent. So oftentimes we can't prevent them. Sometimes we can predict them, or often we can predict them, but they're still going to happen, and we may want to brace for impact. Then we have things that we can predict, that we are happy to let happen. Let's call those the cute kittens. And these are just things that we see coming, but we really don't want to do anything about. So we accept them as disruptions, as changes, as risks, and we just move on with our lives. And then we have their evil twins, which are the evil kittens. These are things we can predict and we want to prevent, and we're also going to prevent. So these are the little nuanced things that we really don't want, because they would constitute some disruptions that we want to prevent. So we end up preventing them altogether. And that really leaves us with only one area that we have not defined yet, which are the things we can predict that are not going to happen. And I'd like to call those the unicorns. Unicorns are also large animals. They also have horns, so we may mistake them for rhinos, but really they don't exist. And they are things that, artifacts that we see maybe in our data that are not going to happen. And it's important for us to separate all those different types of animals as we talk about how to deal with them. So with all those definitions in place, how are we going to deal with them? And I suggest that a holistic risk management approach is a good way of managing both known and unknown events that may disrupt our business. So let's have a little bit of a look at how that could look like. We have things that happen and we just accept them. So we talked about the kittens. We just have a variety of different things that we see, we document, we accept. Then we have another class of things we want to prevent. So that's where prevention comes in. Things that maybe cannot be prevented, we want to at least introduce some sort of rhino detection system, for example, an early warning system that helps us to identify those risks early and at the very least brace for impact or minimize the impact that those events can have on our business. And then last but not least, there's a whole foundation that is resilience. So that's the stability that our organization has to weather any impact of things that are happening before we can then evolve and change and adapt to the new challenges presented. And both early warning system and resilience helps us to stay agile and helps us to then implement risk mitigation or be adaptable to the situations that arise. And that is really important to keep in mind. So change is really constant, change is inevitable, and often necessary for us to grow and survive new challenges that are thrown our way. However, it is also, to me, a very important concept to remind ourselves that not all change is beneficial, and especially changing for the sake of change is never a very good idea. Changing just for the sake of change wastes resources, can create confusion amongst employees, can have negative impact both on quality and on customer satisfaction. And I'm certainly not immune to that. I am, as I mentioned, a technology enthusiast. I love new technology and new tools and new toys. And often I find myself tempted to go for the next new shiny thing, for example, the next new phone. And I really don't have any reason to change. My phone works fine. I have it set up the way that I like it. But I'm tempted. I see this new thing and I say, oh, this is a new phone. I need to have it. And sometimes I prevail. Sometimes I fall or I succumb to the temptation. I actually end up maybe buying a new phone where I just had my old phone for maybe just over a year. And what happens then is I get the new phone, I'm excited, I unpack it. Then I spend maybe a few hours, a few days, depending on setting it up and changing all the settings to reflect exactly how my old phone used to be set up in. And then I start using it exactly as I was using my old phone without really using or necessitating any of the minor upgrades that maybe the new phone has over the old one. And therefore not having gained anything, but having wasted quite a lot of time and resources to acquire a new technology, set it up the way that I wanted to always use it, because there was no pressing need to change. So it is important to embrace purposeful change. And what that means is planning a little bit ahead. So the shiny new thing may not be the thing that you need. Figuring out what you or your organization wants to achieve first, then what you need to change, add, or modify to get there. So instead of saying, oh, I see something new, let me figure out how I can use it, figure out what you want to achieve, and then decide if you need new technology, if you need to change existing technology or processes, or if you need to modify anything to get you to that desired outcome. And focus on those desired outcomes, not on the tools. The tools don't matter as much as the outcomes we want to achieve. And depending on the outcomes, there may be different paths to achieve those outcomes. That may include or not include tools, and it may come in a variety of different flavors. To make this a little bit more concrete, let's look at an example. Let's look at an example of, let's say, a company that currently is completely working on a paper-based. They have everything manual on paper, everything works fine. So they have a manual signature process for approval of documents, and really they don't need to change. Everything works fine. Then one of those disruptions hit. Maybe it's a albino rhino, maybe it's a black swan, and changes the way that things can be done. Let's take a pandemic, for example. And now all of a sudden, it's a little bit more difficult to just circulate documents to be signed in paper. It becomes almost impossible or expensive to manage for wet signatures to be applied. And then now we have the need for a solution. And with the outcome very clearly defined, and we maybe can define the outcome not as desired outcome is a location independent approval process, for example. Now, Notice I didn't say digital, I didn't say electronic, because the outcome that we want is we want to solve for the problem of it cannot be signed in person in one room. What are our options? And then look at all the options out there. And they may include digital, they may include tools, they may include other systems and other processes that can achieve the same thing. And we need to then weigh the pros and cons of different approaches to then get the desired outcome. Maybe this is an opportunity to combine different outcomes together and try to solve all of them at once. But it's good to understand the outcomes first and then figure out what do I need to get there. To make this a little bit clearer, let's work through an example step by step. And I took the example that we probably all can resonate with, which is minimizing reaction time. So we established that things will happen to us. There may be deviations, it may be unexpected disruptions of our supply chains. It may be a lot of different things that happen. And whenever something happens, it's a worthwhile goal and outcome to define is we want to minimize how long it takes us from something happening to us doing something about it. If we analyze this and break it down, we have an event that happens at some point in time. And until we are aware that something happened, a little bit of time can pass. Let's call this the insight latency. That means something happens and we're not instantly aware of it. A little bit of time passes, then we become aware that something has happened, and then we need to investigate. We need to investigate, okay, what has happened? What is the impact? So we analyze, and until the analysis is complete, another chunk of time passes. So that's the analysis latency. Once we've completed our investigation and analysis, we can then go ahead and define our actions. But we need to first decide, okay, what actions can we take? So until we approve the countermeasures after having defined them, another chunk of time passes. So that's our decision latency. And then finally, once we have approved our countermeasures, we do still need to go implement them and complete them. And that's until the countermeasures take effect, the action latency. As you can see on the axis, on the y-axis, we have the benefit and value of adoption. So the quicker we act, the more value we get. And also notice that this is not a linear, but an exponential curve. So really, the quicker we act, the proportion or exponentially more value we get from acting quickly. So how could we go about reducing or minimizing this time? And now let's look for different ways that we can reduce time to achieve the outcome we just defined or set ourselves to. Ultimately, we want to be as quick as possible, so we can look at, okay, how to reduce insight latency. And one of the options would be, well, we introduce real-time capabilities and system integrations. So instead of someone having to flag something went wrong, it's automatically flagged as it happens. So we virtually reduce the insight latency to zero. Then comes analysis. So what can help us analyze? Maybe a standard process to investigate could help. In terms of technology, we can use big data analytics, machine learning, and artificial intelligence to suggest hypotheses, to create new contexts, to speed up an otherwise cumbersome and lengthy investigation process. We can then look at the decision-making process and ask ourselves, okay, what could help make decisions? So one way would be to have decision support systems. This could be visualization, decision trees that are part of your process or solution. Could also be that we automate a large amount of decision making so that decisions are taken as soon as the information is available. That, of course, requires system understanding, but if we are there, we can automate them and reduce the decision latency very drastically. And then as we move on to more advanced integrations of systems and cyber physical systems, we may be able to have adaptations or actions taking effect almost in real time after the decision has been taken without any manual interface. So systems that are able to adjust themselves based on the feedback provided by the analysis. And all of those help us to reduce it down. And then we go out and we figure out, okay, which ones of those are the most achievable, which ones of those are the most attainable, and we maybe introduce them step by step to get us to minimizing that reaction time more and more and to get to the desired outcome. So in summary for the evolution part, traditional evolution, as we've seen, oftentimes involves random changes followed by natural selection. So there's random things changed at a population level, then there is pressure applied, and the fittest just survive. But we, I think, are in a position to even evolve evolution for it to become a tool or a mindset of how to achieve desired outcomes by, for example, really understanding what can be foreseen and what can be unforeseen disruptions and have a mental framework for that. By identifying and understanding the desired outcomes we want to have, that maybe we want to become more resilient, it may be that we want to speed up or reduce certain latencies, and then creating a plan of what good looks like, carefully considering tools and changes that are needed to achieve that desired outcome, and ultimately then allowing us to use this as a purposeful evolution to become better, more adaptable, and quicker. Ultimately, if we think about how adaptability arises, it's a combination of resilience. So how stable are my processes, my people, my technologies to weather any impact? How agile am I to change things as a new challenge arises? And then how quickly can I deploy those changes to evolve into the next level? And that continuous improvement cycle can create more resilience by becoming more adaptable, by becoming more agile, and it kind of amplifies itself. Talking about foreseen and unforeseen disruptions, maybe it's important for us to now look at 2023 and think, okay, what are the disruptions that are likely going to be impacting us? And this comes from a McKinsey study that was performed where CEOs were asked, what are the most impactful disruptive trends that you see for 2023? And focusing just on the top three: escalation of geopolitical risk of prolonged high inflation and economic downturn, and then at the very top, rise of disruptive digital technologies. Those are the things that they see the most disruptive and where they need probably the most focus in 2023. And I want to focus on the very top one to discuss a little bit what we're seeing and how that potentially impacts our industry. And I want to specifically talk about the rise of AI. And the reason why I want to highlight this is I've been following it quite closely. And of course, I'm very interested in what all the new capabilities and potentials are. But when I saw this graph, I was a little bit startled by the sheer speed. So this chart shows the time it takes for users to adopt a new technology. And you have one point at 10 to the 6th power, which is 1 million, and then 1 10 to the 8th power, which is 100 million users. And you can see how long it took Netflix to get to 100 million users. You can see that Twitter and Facebook and Spotify, respectively, were much quicker. Instagram was significantly quicker, but still took quite a significant amount of time to reach 100 million users. And then you see ChatGPT with basically a vertical line upwards. So it took only 2 months, I think, to reach 100 million users on ChatGPT. And that's just to show how fast the adoption of this new technology was and how big the hype was maybe also. But at the same time, and interestingly, there was quite a fast development of the technology as it started off with and where it has come since in just a few months' time. At the same time, what I found very striking is that the technology is self-amplifying. And what I mean by that is there was an article published that talked about how expensive it was to train GPT-3, which was the predecessor model of what we currently have. And it took about, I think, a year and about 4 million in resources to train the model. And then there was a projection to say how long it's going to take to reduce that cost so that it's going to become achievable or attainable to train models on a different scale or to train models on a private scale. And the projections were a few years' time, maybe 5 years' time, until that's significantly reduced down to a few 100,000 to train a model. What happened, however, is Stanford did an experiment. They took a free model of Meta called Llama, and they used GPT to train it and to help with the training. And they ended up being able to do it much quicker for about $600 in just 5 weeks using consumer-grade hardware. And that was striking because we went, in a span of 5 weeks, we went from very expensive, very resource and infrastructure heavy to can be done on a powerful computer at home in just over 5 weeks using existing technology. So that self-amplifying is what will catapult this new technology much faster than I think a lot of people realize. And then there is this whole race to general artificial intelligence, which is both scary and exciting. And there's a lot of things that are going on. If you ever follow artificial intelligence news, a lot of things are coming out all the time that inches closer and closer to tools and artificial intelligence become more and more generalized. But that's all out in the world, ChatGPT. So let's talk a little bit about what AI in action in the real world could mean for quality management. And roughly speaking, when I was thinking about this and putting this slide together, I think what artificial intelligence can do for quality management is do more faster with the data that is available as a header. Roughly speaking, I think that's what we will be able to do. And to give you some specific examples, I think triage and categorization is going to be one. So you have large amounts of records and you need to quickly categorize them so that you can quickly take decisions on focusing on, say, the 10 or 20% of records or documents that need the most attention, and then focus on the other ones later on, or maybe even automizing those as part of your process. Signal detection, so taking large amounts of signal data and creating meaningful insights so that we can act on them. Pattern recognition, again, looking at entire data sets and surfacing data and patterns that were maybe not identified otherwise, saying, hey, we see a pattern here, and maybe just correlation and maybe causation. We may have to investigate why this is drifting out of control and having that at our disposal. Maybe suggesting next best actions, taking a large model and what we have done in the past specific to our industry or organization and say, based on what you're currently working on, these are the next best actions to get you to the best results based on the experience we have. It's almost like having a supercharged artificial intelligence tutor or experienced worker next to you that has the whole experience and history of your organization at their fingertips to help you out with your current job. Then the whole language processing and recognition becomes very interesting because now we get access to otherwise unstructured data sources that were difficult to categorize, and we can pull them into the actual detection and analytics. And then another way of that I find very interesting in terms of large language models is the idea that this becomes now a new interface into our data, a new way of interfacing into the data, a new way of interacting with the data. So think of your documents or all the regulations that apply to you being part of a model that you can now query in normal language saying, hey, I have this situation, what regulations would apply? And it quotes the regulations that would apply back to you instead of you having to have read all of them and then understanding where the information may be and what conflicts may be in different regulations. It could also help compare documents and compare regulations in different countries and different expectations. And ultimately also content generation. That probably is the scariest one from a regulated perspective, but it can help you create outlines. It can help you automatically generate titles based on information provided so that you have a more consistent delivery or a consistent documentation, and it can become much better using your company's data. So those are all, to me, very exciting potential improvements to quality management, where we can move and evolve quality management to the next level. But of course, there is also challenges, especially in our industry, especially in regulated environment. And just want to call out a few that we as an industry need to think about and try to solve. First and foremost is trust. And under trust falls, how do we validate artificial intelligence models or machine learning models? How do we ensure data security? And with validation, is validation even the right concept to ensure proper performance of artificial intelligence? Maybe we need different tools to help us trust and help us be assured that it delivers the expected outcomes. We need to ensure quality of data and availability of data, because any model is only as good as the data that it's provided to it, and that becomes very important. It's a discussion around compliance. How do we make sure that a artificial intelligence is compliant with our regulations? Or are regulations even set out to allow for artificial intelligence? How do they need to change? Again, maybe that comes also back to the topic of validation. Transparency is important, but how do we solve for that? Because at the moment, and by its nature, the model or the algorithm itself is a black box. You can understand the outcomes and the inputs, but the inner workings are usually a black box. Is that okay? Is that any different from a human having their own thought process, but then coming to a conclusion based on the information provided in their experience? And most importantly, our data that we already have, that is already available, becomes infinitely more important, and the quality of the data becomes infinitely more important, because now we're using tools to amplify those signals and create new data and new ideas and new actionable intelligence out of that data. So we really need to take care of the data most of all. So to dive down a little bit deeper into the data topic, let's talk about data lakes for a second and the danger that that entails. So, of course, it's a conceptually good idea to say, okay, let's have all the data in one place and create a data lake that is connected to all our data sources, and then we can just use that data lake to then surface information. And that's a good idea in theory, but there is a danger involved in not knowing what we collect data for, just dumping it all into one place, and then rather than creating data lakes, they turn into data swamps where we have a lot of data, but it's not really prepared or organized in a way that helps to surface those insights. And it just becomes unusable and just a data repository that is not used. So that's a danger that we need to account for when we start thinking about how we architect for these types of things. Another thing that is important to keep in mind is that, again, the outcomes matter more and more as we think about how we combine data. So we have data. Let's take a bunch of Lego bricks, for an example. And we can arrange that, we can sort the data, we can arrange the data, and we can visually present the data. And that's all good. But with the outcome in mind, I think the best way that we can use data, the most meaningful way, is to use data to tell a story. And only then does data come to life. So it's important to keep the outcome in mind as we arrange the data visually to represent that certain story. And it's important that we orchestrate that data in a certain way so that it serves that purpose. So data can be connected in many different ways. If we have a different type of representation here, we have data here displayed as different circles of varying sizes. And with that data, we can do different things. And we can say, okay, we have some information that is relevant to the outcome I'm trying to achieve. And connecting that information creates knowledge that now can be used. Now, maybe based on that knowledge, we can surface certain insights that say, hey, based on this information, we have these two data points that are connected in a certain way. And that's now an insight based on knowledge. And then we can maybe connect those and standardize those, creating wisdom in our organization to leverage that insight that was surfaced. And that's all well and good. But of course, as with so many things, we can also take it too far, and we can read into things a little bit too much. So we can also get into conspiracy theories or a little unicorn once more. So these would be things that look plausible or connections that we may see that are not there, that we need to be aware of as well. And especially as we delegate more and more, maybe to technology, maybe to artificial intelligence, we also need to understand how much context we already have that a artificial intelligence model or an algorithm may not have, and how to account for those. And a funny way of highlighting that point, I came across this, I believe on LinkedIn, is an AI-powered detection engine has identified the longest cow on Earth. And the way that this cow was identified by this image detection engine was as follows. So here, of course, context matters. I believe most of us would be able to identify that that's likely not just one cow. However, as we said, context does matter, and context, data without context can be very misleading or can lead us to the wrong conclusions. So we need to be aware of that. So how do we navigate all this, let's call it AI revolution, into quality management? And I think I want to really highlight quite a few considerations that as an industry, I believe we need to be aware of. And maybe I'll ask you to keep an eye on for the duration of this conference and see how these different parts fit together and how they can be used. Because I believe that these tools are here to stay. They are the worst they will ever be, and they will ever perform. So they will only get better and better and more accurate as we go on. And this technology, specifically generative AI, is going to be used whether we ignore it as an industry or not, whether we are deciding to act on it very slowly as we traditionally do, or embrace it a little bit quicker. People are going to use it because it's making their lives easier in certain ways. And we can decide to ignore it and not introduce it into our systems for the time being. That just means that we will not be able to control how it's used. Or we can decide to, as an industry, decide how we want to control it and what guardrails we want to put in place to use it in a responsible manner, using our own organizational data to do more with the data we have at the moment. And also, I think, as a concept, I don't believe that AI is going to replace a lot of people, but I do believe that people using AI are going to replace people that are not using AI. And that's the very future. And I think it's worth understanding that digital transformation as a whole has been used for a long time now. And oftentimes we see it defined as, oh, we have a digital transformation project and we want to computerize everything, we want to digitize everything. But really, I think an important concept is digital transformation is not a project, it's a journey. And it's a journey that likely doesn't have an endpoint. So it has a starting point. At some point in time, you did start computerizing and connecting your systems, digitalizing your infrastructure so that you have the data available in the digital format. And then you move on to this transformation journey of Industry 4.0, of visibility. So seeing what is happening in your systems and seeing what is happening based on your data. Moving on and evolving from there to transparency. So now when I see what is happening, maybe I can start understanding why it's happening by investigating, by gaining more and more knowledge into my processes, in my systems and my products. And once I understand why things are happening, then I can start predicting what things will happen. Now I understand my processes well enough, say, oh, if these things change, then likely this will also change and this will happen. And so once I see what's happening, I understand why it's happening, and I'm able to predict what's going to happen, I can move on to become adaptable. So now I can have my systems recognize that something is going out of control, for example, and correcting it down back into control. And as the arrow and as the slide suggests, I mean, Industry 4.0 is only 4.0. What comes next is Industry 5.0. And chances are we will have many more steps that we can take on this journey together. Another thing that I realized when I was using this slide, and this is not the first time I've used this slide, is initially I defined this for myself as the journey of digital transformation of a manufacturing process. And I was thinking too narrowly. And I realized that this really applies to the whole organization and not just a process or a system or a manufacturing organization. It is really from the very beginning of the value chain to the very end of the value chain. We go through a digital transformation where we ultimately want to become adaptable. And this, along with the notion of outcomes first, triggered this top-down approach that I now came to believe is probably the best framework to look at when we talk about digital transformation in general. So we have our value chain from ideation to R&D to development to manufacturing, distribution, quality control, post-market surveillance, all of what we do in our industry. And ultimately, we start thinking about outcomes first. Outcomes, what's our major outcome? Our major outcome is customer satisfaction, patient safety. So really the customer in the center. So we have this customer-centric view. And to deliver those outcomes, we may start having the need for, let's call those process suites that deliver those outcomes end to end. But the switch in thinking was we start with an outcome in mind and we break those outcomes down to individual problem statements that people have, that solving them would catapult them into the next stage of evolution of productivity. And then we take those and we say, okay, how can we solve for that one thing? And that brings in applications, and applications would solve one specific outcome or deliver one specific outcome to one or a group of people in your value chain. And another switch that happened is instead of offering those as point solutions that you can deploy as part of solving or delivering that outcome, we go one level deeper and say, okay, we want to build as an industry collection of microservices that do one very specific thing, and just that one thing. So that may be graphical representation, it may be a specific AI application or AI model, it may be electronic signatures, it may be something else. It may be alarming, it may be surveillance, security, it can be a variety of different things that we want to do. And we call those microservices. And those microservices are now used to create applications. So instead of building something from scratch or saying we do a point solution, we start creating libraries of microservices that help us to deliver those outcomes by just combining different outcomes. And that is based on all the data that we ended up connecting in our digital ecosystem. The advantage of this is on one side, we start with the outcome in mind. So we don't run the danger of changing for the sake of changing. We understand what we want to achieve. And then instead of just solving that problem, we do use components to build out and solve for that problem and deliver that outcome so that those components can be reused. So the next challenge that we face may use some of the applications or some of the microservices that are already used and combined in a different way to deliver a different outcome. The bigger the library becomes, the more adaptable we become, and the more adaptable we are to change to anything that comes our way. So that sets us up to be very adaptable and therefore becoming better in, or becoming closer to the fittest and to most adaptable to evolve and to survive any disruptions we might have. So coming back to the very first question I asked you, how many frogs are left on that stone if one decides to jump, and we had 5 to start with? My answer to this is there's still 5 frogs on that stone. Because just because one frog decided to jump doesn't mean that the frog jumped. And the same goes for all of us. Just because we decided to something doesn't mean we're actually doing it. And the importance is to get started. The importance is to actually do something with the information provided, do something with the tools that we have available. So let me quickly summarize a few key takeaways of the keynote presentation I've just given. First of all, quality is much more than just compliance, and it's all around. customer and patient satisfaction. I believe that technology is really the key to the next chapter. That's the new tool that can help us leapfrog into the new stage of our evolution. But it's also very crucial to trust our tools. As we've seen, our tools become more and more complex and more complicated, sometimes maybe considered even a black box. So what are the ways we can trust our tools? And maybe the suggested modularity of those microservices helps us to build trust with simple individual components, and then we can trust the collation of those a little bit more, and we can use that as a basis to verify and validate higher levels of automation and complexity. AI will be instrumental if we like it or not. Change is constant. Risk management and resilience are vital to our future evolution. I think it's also important to change with the new tools in mind. So really not just changing for the sake of changing, sure, but also not changing and then keeping the processes at ease. If we are introducing new technologies or new tools, we need to go back to the drawing board, think of outcomes that we want to achieve, and then see how we can use this new technology and new tool to achieve those outcomes. Because the answer may be different to the processes that you currently have. And using old processes, back to the productivity paradox, is going to lead to none or very little productivity improvements by introducing new tools. Digital transformation is a journey. It's not just a project that we start and finish. So start thinking and acting as if it was. It continues going. We keep doing more and more things. And the data is the fuel for your digital transformation. So data is very important. Data quality is very important. Understanding where your data comes from, what your data looks like, what the data attributes are, is very important. And outcome-based modularity, the concept that I introduced of having microservices building bigger and bigger complexity structures that help us deliver those outcomes, ensures adaptability for the future. So I want to leave you with a quote. And if I have seen further, it is by standing on the shoulders of giants. That's what Sir Isaac Newton said. But I think it's important for us to keep that in mind, that we don't have to reinvent the wheel. We can leverage knowledge and technology that was introduced in industry and quality 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5, and further to stand on the shoulders of giants and reach for the stars. So with that, I want to thank you very much for staying here with me, for listening to me. And I hope that you can take these concepts to heart as you continue to listen to all the insightful presentations that are coming up today and tomorrow, and be able to use a little bit of this mindset to challenge and to improve and evolve. Thank you very much.
All right, thanks everyone. That was the end of that presentation. Again, thanks to Sparta Systems, a Honeywell company, and Fabrizio for allowing us to represent that, and for being the platinum sponsor for this year's virtual conference, which is where that presentation came from, and at this year's face-to-face conference, which I'm now going to share the program for. So Fabrizio will be, I believe he's doing the welcome for Sparta, and he's also presenting on the final day. Doing the keynote on the final day for the plenary. So if you like that presentation, he'll be there again. Those of you that are not that are on maybe at the moment and thinking about attending the conference, by all means, have a look on the RQA website. This is the program. Again, we've got a plenary session to begin with in the morning before breaking into different GXP, so GCP, IT, quality management, GVP, and animal and veterinary products, and then on the Thursday, day 2, we also look at GLP, including the clinics in the morning, which is where you can come and listen to a panel of experts talk about different topics. So like I said, if you haven't booked for the conference yet, you've got 2 days for the early bird discount to go, where you can do that. And you can book. So our next presentation is at quarter past 2, I should say, UK time. So if you're hanging about for that, I'm going to put the conference advert on for a few minutes, and I'll see you back here at 2:15. Thanks for attending that first one. Really appreciate it.
Thank you, Gareth. Welcome, everybody.
Okay, so now a couple of minutes before we start the next stream. So the next stream is from one of our gold sponsors, RiverArc. And this again is from the 2023 RQA virtual conference. This is called Inspection Findings, what we can learn from them, how to analyze the data and get the most out of it. So this lasts about an hour and, well, I say about, it lasts for an hour and 22 minutes. So that will take us up to 20 to 4, and then 20 to 4 we've got Kevin from Master Control. He'll be presenting to 3 steps to compete in digital quality. So just one more minute and we'll start the stream about inspection findings. So just play through the video one more time. Maybe you guys want to mute the music if you've been listening for long enough. You can use the chat if you're on LinkedIn, thanks to the few people that have used the chat. So if you're on LinkedIn or you're direct on our Vimeo page, by all means, use the chat. Let me know where you're from. If there's any questions about the conference, then by all means, put them in there. But we'll play this video through one more time and then we'll make a start. Fantastic. So welcome back. Thanks everyone for joining us. I can see we've got a few people either on the RQA website, watching on the RQA website, or from LinkedIn, or direct on Vimeo. We're also streaming this on YouTube. I saw one person had got the notification watching on YouTube. So hi, whoever you are. I hope you're not using the chat function because I'm not there to do anything on it. So our next presentation, like I said, inspection findings. What can we learn from them? How to analyze the data and get the most out of it? And again, these are presenters from our gold sponsor, RiverArc, who again, we really appreciate their ongoing support. If you're in the Anglia region, then we have the Anglian Regional Forum coming up on the 21st of September at the British Racing School in Newmarket. The RiverArc guys are sponsoring it, which we really appreciate, and they'll be presenting a few times at the event as well. So again, that's on the RQA website. Take a look at the program, and maybe we'll see you at the British Racing School in Newmarket on the 21st of September. But here we go. Here's from the 2023 virtual conference, a presentation all about inspection findings, and this is an hour and 22 minutes. Here you go.
Thank you, Gareth. Welcome, everybody. Welcome to the session on inspection findings, what we can learn from them, how to analyze the data to get the most out of it. My name is Milind Nadgowda, and I am the Director of Operations at RiverArc, a quality consulting firm. I'm based in the UK and speaking to you all from a warm day here in England.
Hi, I'm Lovelin Kukreja. I'm based out of Muscat and I work as a Principal QA Auditor at RiverArc. I welcome you all to this session and hope you all are going to enjoy this session. Thank you.
Before we dive into the session, a quick reminder, a gentle reminder about the Q&As. If you have any questions or comments, please use the the section provided for Q&As as indicated earlier on. We will dive into the presentation now.
Yeah.
Just as a quick thing, a quick note for everybody, both Lovelin and I will go off camera just to save some bandwidth in case you guys can hear us or cannot hear us. Sometimes you're not too sure about technology, so we'll go off camera. But I assure you, both of us are here. You will hear us talking and the slides rolling thereafter.
So talking about inspection, we all know and understand the role of inspection is very pivotal in guaranteeing the secure and effective functioning of our organization and businesses. It also helps us in adhering to the regulation and standards. This entire methodology of inspection, it enables us to detect the areas which require enhancement and the formulation of the practical remedies. The purpose of this presentation is to delve into the significance of inspection findings. These inspection findings, they are a very key source of valuable insights, and it also illustrates how analyzing the data can facilitate our organizations in learning and for the future improvements. Now, as you all can see that this slide is showing the definition of inspection per the GCP. All the inspections which are done by the different regulatory authorities, they are designed to assess the compliance with applicable laws, regulations, and the quality standards, and also to verify the safety, efficacy, and the quality of products. Inspections which are done by different regulatory authorities like FDA, MHRA, EMA, they are very integral part of ensuring compliance with the regulations and the guidelines. These are related to the development, manufacturing, and distribution of pharmaceuticals, medical devices, and other healthcare products. They are very crucial for maintaining the integrity of the pharmaceutical, medical device, and the healthcare product industries. They serve as a very key mean for verifying compliance with the extensive regulations and the guidelines and help us in governing the development, manufacturing, and the distribution of these products. The entire objective of this inspection is to evaluate whether the companies which are operating in these industries, are they adhering to the relevant laws and regulations and the quality standards. It also includes assessing processes, facilities, documentation, quality control measures, the overall, you can say the overall structure of the QMS of an organization in order to ensure that the products, they meet the required safety, efficacy, and the quality standards. Next slide. Now, the regulatory inspections, they typically involve thorough assessment of various aspects, including manufacturing facilities, quality management systems, record keeping practices, product testing procedures, and also the adherence to overall GCP or the GMP. The inspection process involves on-site visit by the regulatory inspectors who conduct very comprehensive evaluation in order to determine the compliance. The inspectors are going to review your documentation. They are going to observe the operation or the activities that are being performed at your site. They are going to interview the subject matter experts. They are going to interview some key personals who are doing or actually involved in conduct of these activities. Sometimes they may collect samples also for the further analysis if required. The findings of this entire process or the inspection process per se, they are documented in the inspection reports. That document that serves as a very crucial reference for the regulatory decision making.
So that brings into the fact where we find all of these various authorities and such. This is just a not a very exhaustive list, but a list of all the authorities where most of these inspections are conducted by here. And and as you know, the inspections play a critical role in safeguarding public health by identifying any deficiencies or non-compliances and issues that could potentially impact the safety, efficacy, or quality of pharmaceuticals or medical devices or health products, essentially. They help ensuring that manufacturers and distributors and developers maintain the highest standards of quality and adhere to regulations that are in place for to protect the consumers, essentially. Companies that undergo successful inspections tend to demonstrate their commitment to quality and compliance, which also enhances their reputation, instill confidence in their products, and facilitate market access. Conversely, inspections revealing non-compliance may lead to regulatory enforcement actions, such as warning letters, product recalls, and even legal consequences. So let's roll and find out what actually are inspection findings. This being the title of our presentation today and the basis of what we are going to be talking. Let's do a little more deeper dive into what these are and find out a little more. The inspection findings, they encompass the comprehensive observations, evaluations, and conclusions derived from inspections carried out by the competent authorities, as Loveleen was alluding to earlier on, including too, but these are not just limited to the FDA, MHRA, EMA, and other relevant agencies. These findings are the result of meticulous assessments, as was stated earlier, conducted to ensure compliance with regulations, with guidelines, and with quality standards that have been internally set by the organizations themselves. During inspections, the regulatory authorities, the ones that are listed here and many more, meticulously examine a wide range of factors, including manufacturing facilities, quality management systems, documentation practices, product testing protocols, and also look at how you have been compliant with the industry guidelines, such as good manufacturing practices, good clinical practices, and such. The aim is to thoroughly evaluate whether the organization and business comply with the stringent regulations and guidelines. That is the overall intent. The findings, however, play a pivotal role in identifying areas of non-compliance, deficiencies, potential risks that may impact the safety, efficacy, or quality of the products under scrutiny. These findings serve as valuable indicators, as you will see through the rest of the discussion that we are going to have today, and how it will add value. These findings indicate an overall performance and adherence of organizations and businesses to regulatory standards. By highlighting areas that require improvement or corrective actions, inspection findings contribute to the continuous enhancement of safety protocols, product quality, and regulatory compliance in general. The significance of these findings extends beyond the immediate inspection process. And that's why we are having this discussion today. So analyzing and interpreting these findings provides regulatory authorities, organizations, and businesses with valuable insights into potential areas for improvement, risk mitigation strategies, and the development of actionable solutions. These inspection findings also contribute to the body of knowledge within respective industries, enabling stakeholders to learn from past experiences and enhance their practices for the future. Effective utilization of such inspection findings can drive organizational learning, kind of foster a culture of continuous improvement and enhance overall operational efficiency. So by proactively addressing issues that have been identified in implementing corrective measures, organizations and business can then bolster their compliance with regulations, bolster consumer confidence, and eventually ensure the safe and efficient functioning of their operations.
Now, as Milind already explained us what is inspection findings and how important the inspection findings are, though all the regulatory agencies, they provide all the required details in their inspection reports, but there are some differences or the key differences in which it's mainly, around the format in which they are going to present these inspection observation. In this slide, we can look at some of the differences between the FDA and the EU. During the inspections which are done by the FDA, the regulatory authority, when FDA determines that there's a finding, they provide the inspectee with a written document, the famous F form FDA 483. This document is then presented to the inspectee during the final closeout meeting itself, and it is a very important record of the inspection outcome. It is a crucial tool which is used to communicate the observation and the conclusions which are made during the inspection process. It is going to outline all the identified non-compliances or the deficiencies which were observed by the FDA inspectors. The inspectee which receives this document, they are given an opportunity to respond or to address the identified non-compliance and the deficiencies which are outlined in this document within a designated time frame. The failure to adequately address these findings that can result in regulatory enforcement actions such as warning letters, product recalls, or further regulatory scrutiny. And in the inspections which are done by the EU, there's a specific process which is followed for providing the feedback to the inspectee. Unlike the FDA, EU inspectors, they provide a oral feedback on the most significant findings during the closeout meeting. And the written inspection report that is provided, but after the closeout at a very later stages in the process. The oral feedback which is provided by the EU inspectors at the closeout meeting, that serves as an initial overview of the inspection findings. It is going to highlight all the most relevant and the critical observations which are made during the inspection. The immediate feedback, it allows the inspectee to have an initial understanding of the key areas that require the attention or the corrective action. While the oral feedback gave the inspector an initial understanding of these findings, the written inspection report that will provide a more detailed, a more comprehensive account of the observations. The written report is shared with the inspectee as at a very later stage, which is typically after the closeout meeting. This report includes a thorough analysis of the inspection findings, including any non-compliances or the deficiencies that were identified during the inspection. Overall, EU inspection that follows a process of oral feedback on the significant findings during the closeout meeting and delivering the written inspection reports at a later stage. And this approach of EU, it ensures that the inspectee, they receive immediate awareness of the critical areas, maybe in an oral feedback format, but they definitely share all the required details, and also a comprehensive report detailing all the inspection findings, which is provided at a later time point. The other important difference is that the FDA, they can cite non-compliance only against the US regulations, specifically for the CDR, like the 21 CFR Part 11, 50, 54, 312, 314, and so on. These regulations, they encompass various aspects of the clinical trials, data integrity, good laboratory practices, drug manufacturing. The FDA focuses on evaluating compliance with these specific regulations during their inspection. It is very worth mentioning that FDA does not have the authority to cite non-compliance to the ICS GCP. The ICS GCP guidelines provide internationally accepted standards for the conduct of clinical trials. While the FDA may consider these guidelines during inspection, but they will not formally cite any non-compliance against these. And this is the significant difference between the FDA and the EU inspections, because in the EU inspections, EU inspectors can cite non-compliance against ICS GCP along with the EU regulations. The EU inspectors, they have the authority to assess the compliance with these internationally accepted standards for the clinical trials. This means that during the inspection, EU inspectors can identify any deviation from the ICS-GCP guidelines and they can cite them as non-compliances. That is why in the comparison studies, sometimes it is found there are more number of observations or more number of findings from the EU inspectors vis-a-vis compared to the FDA inspectors. The another difference is in the terms of the overall final classification. The FDA assesses the totality of a site inspection rather than grading every individual finding. What this means is that the FDA is going to consider all the observation and the findings collectively in order to determine the overall compliance status of the inspected site. The FDA's final classification determination that provides an evaluation of the site's compliance with the applicable regulations and guidelines. Furthermore, the EU inspection process that includes a grading system for each and every finding which is identified during the inspection. This grading system allows them to assess the severity and the impact of each finding. The grades assigned to the finding, they reflect their significance and the potential impact on the integrity of clinical trials or the quality of the pharmaceutical products. The grading system, which is employed by the EU inspectors, it helps to prioritize the identified issues and allows the inspector to understand the relative importance of each finding. It enables the inspector to focus on their efforts on addressing the more critical and high impact findings first. The written inspection report, it includes not only the detailed observation and findings, but it also provides the corresponding grades which are assigned to each finding. And this provides a clear and a structured overview of the inspection results. The grades which are assigned to the findings that serve as an indication of their severity, allowing the inspector to prioritize corrective actions accordingly.
Let me walk you guys through the categorization of inspection findings after this, because that happens to be one other important aspect to know what kind of data you have and what does it mean in terms of doing the analysis based on these categorizations. So the regulatory authorities categorize inspection findings based on their severity and impact. That was what was explained earlier on, and the focus here is on patient safety and product quality as it goes. This classification system enables a risk-based approach where critical or major findings carry greater significance than minor or non-critical findings. The categorization of inspection findings serves as a guide for prioritizing corrective actions and addressing areas that pose the highest risk. Some of the common areas that are covered during inspection are listed here. Not necessarily these apply to every type of inspection, but we've tried to put in one from every subset of or every subtype of inspection that we have seen. So during inspections, regulatory authorities focus on various areas. And let's look at some of them here. The quality management systems. Inspectors tend to evaluate the organization's QMS to ensure that appropriate processes and controls are in place that help maintain product quality and compliance with regulations. This includes assessing procedures for document control, change management, risk management, and CAPAs and deviations. In terms of manufacturing processes, the second example that we have quoted here, the inspectors perhaps will be scrutinizing manufacturing processes to verify compliance with GMP, for example. This involves assessing items such as equipment validation, process control, cleanliness, personnel training, adherence to standard operating procedures, CAPAs, and so on. The goal here is to ensure that products are manufactured consistently, safely, and in accordance with established quality standards. When they are evaluating, inspectors are looking at laboratory controls. Of course, they are looking at ensuring accurate and reliable testing of all elements, be it raw materials, be it in-process samples, be it finished product, be it lab samples for bioanalysis, lab samples from non-clinical studies, and so on. This includes assessing whether calibration of those equipments has been done adequately, have those methods been validated. Is there data integrity controls? Are there adequate data integrity controls in place? And also, are you adhering to all the required the required legislation and guidelines expectations as well? So the overall proper laboratory controls are critical, as we know, for maintaining the quality, safety, and efficacy of pharmaceuticals, medical devices, and healthcare products, and that's what they'll be looking at. The other example that we have here is of product labeling, and regulatory authorities assess product labeling to verify compliance with applicable regulations again and ensure that accurate and comprehensive information is provided. And this includes whether the content, the accuracy, readability, adherence to labeling requirements, etc., is maintained with. Adverse event reporting is another area which is looked at during the GCP and pharmacovigilance inspections. And here they'll be focusing on evaluating the organization's AE reporting processes. The competent authorities ensure that companies will want to have enough assurances that the companies have robust systems in place to promptly collect, assess, report these AEs associated with their products, and also make sure that it's geared towards collecting crucial post-market surveillance data and ensuring that product safety is continually monitored. Yeah. So regulatory authorities consider the severity and impact of these inspection findings when determining the appropriate regulatory response. The critical findings, such as those related to serious breaches, for example, of patient safety or significant product quality issues or data integrity issues, can lead to more immediate and stringent regulatory actions. And these actions may include product recalls, regulatory enforcement measures, and even suspension or revocation of licenses as applicable. On the other hand, minor and non-critical findings typically require corrective actions, but may not result in immediate regulatory actions. However, it is essential for organizations to address all findings, regardless of their severity, to maintain compliance, enhance product quality, and ensure patient safety. So overall, the inspection findings, as we have seen so far, serve as valuable feedback. Haven't said it enough number of times to improve their operations and compliance with regulations for organizations. Organizations are expected to develop and implement corrective and preventative actions in response to these identified findings. The regulatory authorities often conduct follow-up inspections again as well to assess whether organizations have adequately addressed the previously identified findings. So it's important that the CAPs have been completed and have been implemented, and there is a sustained level of compliance that is being maintained essentially within the organization. So it is crucial to proactively address inspection findings and continuously monitor the compliance status. Let's perhaps look at the inspection findings as classified by each of these regulatory authorities before we do a deep dive into how to do the analysis of this data. So again, this is I'm preaching to the choir, as I would say. So here, this information you are aware of when it comes to the final classification, as Navleen was touching upon earlier on. The FDA takes a comprehensive approach by evaluating the entirety of a site inspection rather than individually grading each of these findings. So by considering all the observations and findings as a whole, the FDA determines the overall compliance status of the inspected site. The final classification determination serves as an evaluation of the site's adherence to the relevant regulations and guidelines. This approach allows the FDA to assess the broader compliance picture rather than looking at each one in its isolation, and consider the cumulative impact, essentially, of the findings on the site's operations. Instead of focusing solely on individual deficiencies, the FDA considers the context and significance of the inspection findings, taking into account their collective effect on patient safety, product quality, and regulatory compliance as such. The FDA's final classification determination provides valuable insight into the site's overall compliance status and serves as a basis for regulatory decision-making, as we know. Based on this determination, the FDA may take appropriate actions, such as issuing warning letters, imposing regulatory sanctions, and, as said earlier, recommended remedial measures to ensure compliance. The classification system, as you see here, those three wonderfully green scrolls, three scrolls with different colors. The one in green talking about the NAI, the one in kind of off pink talking about the OAI, and the other green showing a VAI kind of classification. What do these mean? The NAI classification signifies that no significant deviations from applicable regulations or standards were identified during this inspection. It indicates that the inspected entity is in compliance with the requirements set forth by the FDA. This classification is a positive outcome, a cause for celebration in many places, and rightfully so. It of course demonstrates that the entity has met the necessary criteria and operates within the established guidelines. On the other hand, the OAI, when you look at it, this one is assigned when significant violations of the regulations are observed during the inspection. It suggests that the inspected entity has failed to meet required standards, potentially compromising patient safety or product quality. The OAI classification alerts the FDA that regulatory or administrative actions may be necessary to address the identified deficiencies. And these actions can include warning letters, product recalls, fines, other regulatory enforcement measures. The VAI classification, however, is assigned when some deviations from regulations are found, but they are not considered significant enough to warrant immediate regulatory or administrative actions. V standing for the voluntary in there, it indicates that the identified deficiencies do not pose an immediate risk to patient safety or product quality. However, the inspected entity is encouraged to take voluntary corrective action to address the identified deviations and help improve compliance. The VAI classification serves as a prompt for entity to proactively rectify the identified issues before they escalate and require formal regulatory actions. The FDA now uses the FDA's use of these classifications provide valuable information to the inspected entity as well. So it overall provides transparency and clarity regarding the compliance status and the potential regulatory actions that may follow. These classifications guide the subsequent steps and actions that the FDA may take to ensure compliance and maintain patient safety. It is important for the inspected entities to carefully review and understand the classification. And for NAI classifications, it is clear it is essential to continue maintaining compliance to avoid any further regulatory issues. Entities classified as OAI should promptly address what has been identified as violations and make sure they implement the appropriate corrective actions to meet those regulatory requirements and mitigate those potential risks. And even the VAI, should take the opportunity to voluntarily address the identified deviations and improve their compliance to prevent future issues. Let's look at the next piece from the MHRA.
The MHRA employs a categorization system to classify inspection findings, which is based on their nature and the significance. If you look at the system which is followed by MHRA, this is more or less in alignment with what is followed in the industry for the audit observations. So these categories include critical, major, and other findings. And it helps to provide a clear understanding of the identified issues and also provides the guidance in order to take the necessary actions for the compliance. The critical findings, they are assigned to the violations or deficiencies which possess a significant risk to the patient's safety, product quality, and or the data integrity. Now, these findings, they indicate severe departures from the regulations or the standards. And definitely, they require immediate corrective actions in order to address the identified risk. The critical findings, they highlight the urgent need in order to rectify these issues. And also we need to have some mitigation measures so that the potential harm to the patients or to the integrity of the product or the data that can be avoided. When we talk about the major findings, although they are not as severe as critical findings, but they still represent significant departures from the regulations or the standards. While they may not possess an immediate or a serious risk to the patient safety or the product quality, but they definitely require attention and they also prompt corrective actions. These findings, they provide us an indication of the substantial non-compliance, and they also highlight the need for the remedial measures so that we can ensure adherence to the regulations and we can mitigate the potential risk. Now, in addition to the critical and the major findings, the MHRA also identifies a category which is other findings. Now, these findings encompass less severe deviations. It might be just general observations, or it can also include sometimes the recommendations for improvement. Now, while these findings, may not be classified as critical or major, but they still require attention and the action. The other findings, they serve as an opportunity for organization to address the areas of improvement. And it also provides them an opportunity to enhance their compliance with the regulation and standards. These findings, it may include the suggestions for optimizing their processes. It may include enhancing documentation. It may be related to implementing certain best practices. The categorization of the findings by the MHRA that provides a structured approach in order to assess the compliance, and it also helps the organizations in identifying areas that require immediate attention or the improvement. It enables organization to prioritize their corrective actions based on the severity of the particular observation and also the significance of the identified issue. By addressing the critical, major, and other findings, organizations can enhance their compliance, they can improve their patient safety, they can maintain their product quality, and they can strengthen their overall regulatory standing as an organization. Now, it is very important for organization to take the categorization of the findings very seriously, and in order and to respond to them promptly with the appropriate corrective actions and the defined timelines. It also includes implementing robust systems, having adequate procedures and controls to rectify the identified issues, to have actions which can help us in preventing the reoccurrence, to ensure the sustained compliance. The organizations should proactively engage with the MHRA to provide updates on the progress made in addressing the identified findings and demonstrate their commitment to the continuous improvement. The MHRA's categorization of the findings serves as a very valuable tool for both for the regulatory authorities and as well as for the inspected entities. It promotes the transparency, consistency, accountability in the assessment of the compliance, and it helps to maintain the highest standards of patient safety and the product quality in the healthcare industry.
We've also got what the EMA have in terms of their classification and of these observations. Won't go through all of it. It's fairly similar to what we have for the MHRA findings. They also have the critical, major, and minor, again focusing clearly on the fact that what kind of significant risk is exposure is seen to patient safety, product quality, or data integrity in these cases. And again, considering the fact that the critical ones are the ones that need to be ones addressed quite immediately to ensure that the compliance is maintained, and also ensuring that there is enough willingness from the organization to indicate that they want to align to the expectations as per the regulators. That similar to that that what we heard for MHRA, the major also is our serious deficiencies and our direct violations of the GCP principles in this case. And again, they would be adversely affecting the right, safety, and well-being of the patients, subjects, and of the quality and integrity of the data, essentially. So similar to what we mentioned in MHRA observations, again here, adequate steps, adequate CAPAs, responses, and process changes need to be put in place, as well as corrections for those documents that are deficient towards the non-compliance need to be addressed as well. So the last but not the least, the minor observations are the ones which would be the ones that are expected to adversely affect the right, safety, of well-being of the subjects and of quality and integrity of data. So these ones are again need to be addressed as indicated, and they are called as the other findings, essentially, not minor as it says there. And these findings encompass less severe deviations, observations, or recommendations for improvement. The EMA's categorization of inspection findings provides a structured approach to assess compliance, and it prioritizes corrective actions. It enables organizations to understand the severity and significance of the identified issues and develop appropriate strategies for improvement. Okay. Let's look at some real examples and citations according to these various authorities. And these we have taken from the public domain that is available. And as you can see, the three different inspection findings and what they mean. So the 483 here on the left, that's a citation which highlights essentially two significant areas of non-compliance during a clinical investigation. Firstly, in the first bullet point, there was a failure to obtain informed consent from study participants in accordance with 21 CFR Part 50. This means that subjects were enrolled in this study without properly documented informed consent. And the second one, there was a lack of adequate monitoring, and here monitoring being an essential component of ensuring integrity and reliability of clinical trial data. The insufficient monitoring visits were the reason for this, and this was leading to inadequate oversight of the study, and then additionally incomplete source data verification and failure to identify and address protocol deviations were identified. So as you can see here, in this FDA citation, it's very clear and crisp in terms of what the issue was and how it was found, and where they had failed against what specific piece of regulation, and so on. In the EMA inspections, when you look at it, the inspection finding, again, here we have picked up 2 examples, and one of them were about monitoring, inadequate monitoring, and the other one about non-compliance with protocol requirements. If you see the language that's in there, again, it clearly states from an EMA perspective, it says the inadequate monitoring of clinical trials, which also included insufficient oversight for investigators, inadequate source data verifications, and failure to detect and address protocol deviation. So very clear idea about what the violations are, again, here in this case, very clear sub elements that can be identified and teased out of this, specifically calling out inadequate source data verification, for example, or insufficient oversight of investigators, for example. So the inspection observation itself should be looked at in context of what has been written, as well as what it means and what data element it is giving out to you, which can be utilized for analysis, basically. That's what we are getting at here. And similarly, for the second one, when you look at the non-compliance with protocol requirements, including unauthorized deviations and approved protocol amendments and so on. So again, here, there is very good sound bites in terms of what clearly the deviations were from the protocol, or where they were non-compliant, and what kind of protocol approval processes were employed, and what was not clear in the documentation, and so on. And so it's very, very crisp again here. Similarly, in the MHRA inspection finding examples that we have here as well, the MHRA inspection finding, again here, non-compliance related to a clinical study, and here maintaining the adequate records of the study related communications and correspondence with key stakeholders, such as sponsors, ethics committees, and regulatory authorities was the item that was identified as a deficiency. And I mean, again, pointing towards lack of proper documentation, record keeping practices, and so on. And so this again points towards transparency, traceability, and accountability in clinical research, which perhaps is the item that would be of our interest. And in the second example, when you look at it again here, this one's pointing everything towards the subject's confidentiality and privacy. And here, the inadequate methods of handling, storing the participants' data, the inappropriate measures that were in place, or making sure that the confidentiality and privacy of study participants is maintained was not ensured. And then it had a double repercussions, not just from a clinical regulatory perspective, but also from a data privacy perspective. So those are the examples we wanted to quote here, and just say that how these are drafted and what's included in it. Now let's roll to the next one and see where we find these inspection findings, and what do we do with them, and so on. So okay.
As we are going to talk about the data analytics as a part of this entire presentation. Now, the first important point is where is going to be the source of our information, and how we are going to find that information. In our case, we are talking about inspection findings. So in order to find our inspection findings from the key regulators, we can typically visit their official websites. And you can see in this slide, there are some common regulatory authorities, and the link is provided in this slide, wherein we can find the inspection information. For example, for the FDA, it provides access to the inspection findings through an electronic reading room, which is called FDA Establishment Inspection Report. In this database, you can find the inspection report related information in the form of a spreadsheet, which provides us the information in terms of when the inspection was done, whether it's a VAI, NEI, OI. And in this database, this is available on FDA's official website under the Freedom of Information Act. And in the case of EMA, they publish the compilation of their inspection findings as in the form of annual report or in the form of matrices. And this information can be found for both for the GMP inspection reports and for the GCP inspection reports. It can be found in the compliance section, or by simply searching EMA inspection findings on their website. Similar to EME, MHRA also provides the annual compilation reports for the different areas like the GMP, GCP, and other relevant information related to the inspections. This can be found under the inspection enforcement and standards in the MHRA inspection findings, or by simply typing MHRA inspection findings on their websites. In the case of Health Canada, they publish inspection findings and reports on their websites. We can access these reports by visiting compliance and enforcement section, or by simply searching Health Canada inspection findings on their website. The PMDA that also provides access to the inspection findings through their websites. You can find inspection reports including GMP inspection reports and the GCP inspection reports under the compliance and enforcement section, or simply by searching PMDA inspection findings on the websites. Now, it is very important to note that the availability and the accessibility of these inspection findings, it may vary among different authorities. Some authorities may provide you comprehensive database or reports like EMA or MHRA, while others may give you a limited access. Additionally, specific information regarding inspection findings that may be subject to the confidentiality or the data protection regulations as well. From the inspection findings, once we have this database, once we have this source of information with us, it can be used in various manners, and it can provide us very valuable information about the observations and the non-compliances which were identified by the regulatory authorities during the inspection. It provides us an insight into the specific aspects of the documentation practices and the processes that may be non-compliant with the regulatory requirements or the standards. These inspection finding reports, they are very crucial in assessing the impact on the patient safety and the data integrity. It very clearly highlights the areas that require improvement and the corrective actions. When the regulatory authorities, they do inspection, their primary goal is to ensure compliance with applicable regulation, guidelines, and the best practices. During their entire inspection process, they very thoroughly evaluate different aspects of an organization operation, such as manufacturing processes. They are going to look into your quality management system. They are going to look into the documentation practices, the data integrity measures, the adherence to the protocol requirements in case of clinical trials. And based on their observation, the inspectors, they identify non-compliant practices or deficiencies, which are then documented as inspection findings. Now, these inspection findings, they provide us a very detailed account of what was observed during the inspection. It will specify the specific area where the non-compliance was identified. It will also highlight the discrepancies between the observed practices and the regulatory requirements. These findings, it also includes deficiencies in the documentation. It will provide you what was the actual deviation from your established procedure, what were the inadequate QC measures, or what was a failure. In case, for example, it can be a failure to the adherence to the protocol. Also, the inspection findings, they shed a light on the potential impact of the non-compliance on the patient safety and the data integrity. The regulatory authorities, they prioritize patient safety and integrity of the scientific data as a very important part of their inspection activities. Non-compliant practices can pose very risk to the patient well-being. It can compromise the reliability of the clinical trial result, or it can jeopardize the quality and the efficacy of the manufactured products. Now, these inspection findings, they help us in identifying the extent of these risks, and it also allows the regulatory authorities to understand or what actions that they are going to take after the inspection. And for the organization, it is a key information because it will help us in taking the appropriate actions in order to mitigate them. Let's consider as an example in the pharmaceutical industry. For example, let's say during an inspection, it may be found that a manufacturer has inadequate documentation practices, such as incomplete batch records or insufficient data integrity controls. Now, these findings, they will indicate that there are deficiencies in the recording and the maintenance of the critical information, which is related to the manufacturing process. Now, for regulatory authorities, such non-compliance can have serious implications, including the potential for batch contamination, incorrect doses, or compromised product quality. By identifying these findings, the regulatory authority, they can require the manufacturer to implement corrective actions, which can include improving documentation practice, which can improve strengthening data integrity controls, or to ensure that the safety and the efficacy of their products is maintained. Let's look at some example in terms of clinical trials. Um, let's see if there is an inspection finding, which is, let's say, saying that there are deviations from the approved protocol, such as enrolling participants without the proper informed consent, or not following the investigation plan. Now, these findings, they raise a concern about the participants' right, about the data accuracy and the scientific integrity. The corrective actions, it may include reconsenting the affected participants, implementing stricter adherence to the protocol, conducting additional analysis to ensure what is the impact of the deviations on the trial outcomes.
Let's look a little more at what the strategy should be for such inspection finding review then. So now it's going to be very hard trying to understand and prepare a single all-encompassing comprehensive strategy. But again, you've got to look at developing a comprehensive strategy by some means for the review of these inspection findings. And you've got to use a systematic approach that includes examining individual inspections, analyzing collective reports from regulators, and utilizing data analytics. Now, but here's kind of a strategy that we propose, which would work essentially. These three-pronged approach essentially is what we are thinking. Now, when we are looking at the reviewing of the individual inspections, and just bear in mind that this is always available to the inspectee. This information might be just exclusive to the inspectee, but in case if you do get hold of one of those, then you look at those from a thoroughly analyze each inspection and each of those items that have been included, paying special attention to the observations, non-compliances, and specific aspects of documentation practice or processes identified, as you would do with any old audit report and any old inspection report. Identify common trends and look at what kind of recurring issues have come through from previous inspection reports, and just see if there are any systemic deficiencies that have already been identified in those inspection findings, and also look at what are all the known compliances that have been listed, which point towards the three big elements of patient safety, product quality, and data integrity, and then prioritize actions based upon that. The second aspect there is looking at collective analysis by regulators, and this probably is the most interesting part for all of you who are listening in today. And this one is looking at the consulting the annual reports published by the regulatory authorities such as the EMA and the MHRA. Now, these reports, as you know, often provide a comprehensive analysis of inspection findings. They themselves do some trending. They themselves do some finding assessment across multiple inspections, and they'll always include what was the situation previously, and they include some valuable insights there. Look at all of those. See what the regulators' insights, the summaries, and conclusions are in there, and what it kind of gives you a idea about what's the most prevalent non-compliant areas, what are the emerging risks as seen by the regulators, and so on. It also kind of shows light in terms of what the regulatory expectations are, and what if there has been any change in guideline, how that has impacted what is being seen here, and so on. And that's what that analyzing of the collective data would mean. And now performing data analytics on all detailed inspection observations listed on the competent authority websites is a third piece of the strategy that we are talking about. And I think we'll spend a lot more time talking about this aspect today in the rest of this session. This one will be all about utilizing data analytic tools and techniques to analyze the wealth of information that's available in these inspection observations, identifying kind of patterns, correlations, clusters within the inspection findings to gain deeper insights into non-compliance trends, root causes, and what could be the potential areas of improvement for your organization. So there could be that. And you can look at extracting valuable metrics, look at frequency of specific non-compliances or severity of identified issues, essentially, to prioritize what are the ones which need to be attended to when compared to your organization.
Now, in today's discussion, as Milind said, that we are mainly going to focus on the data analytics, and we are going to see what can be applied to get the maximum leverage for the QA teams. Data analytics is a very powerful approach, and it involves examining large volumes of the data to uncover meaningful insights, to identify some patterns, trends. It encompasses a very wide range of techniques and the methods that can be applied to the various type of informations to improve the processes and to enhance the overall efficiency in a business or system. You're going to see a little bit of more detail about these methods and what techniques can be used in the upcoming slides. One of the key benefits of the data analytics is its ability to extract the valuable insights from the vast amounts of data. In the today's digital age, we do generate and we do collect enormous amount of data from various sources, which can be customer interactions, sale transactions, operational processes, and many more. In our case, so many inspection reports or the analysis can be done from these inspection findings. However, without the effective analysis, this data is like an untapped potential. And the data analytics techniques, they help us to tap this potential. They help us to allow to delve into this data and to uncover the hidden patterns, to identify these trends, to identify the correlations that may not be apparent from the traditional methods. Now, the reason for performing data analytics, as you can see in the slide, is when we do the data analytic approach, when we apply that type of approach to the enormous amount of data, it can help us to identify various trends, and these matrices, they might otherwise simply go unnoticed. They provide us insights into the valuable information, and that can help us in our decision making and strategy for the development. For example, by analyzing the inspection data over the time, it may be possible to identify trends and patterns. It can help us in identifying the different areas of deficiencies, which are, let's say, targeted or identified by the regulatory inspectors. This information can also be used to develop targeted interventions or quality improvement initiatives to address the common issues. The comparison of inspection data across different regions or, let's say, across the different regulatory authorities, that can provide us insights into differences in the regulatory requirements or the enforcement practices. This information that can be used by the companies to ensure compliance with the regulatory standards across multiple markets. The data analytics can also enable predictive and prescriptive analysis. By analyzing the historical data and identifying these patterns, trends, the businesses can make predictions about the future trends, the customer behavior, or the market dynamics. They can assist us in proactive decision making and in the risk mitigation. The prescriptive analysis, it takes the data analytics a step further by recommending specific actions or interventions to optimize the outcomes, which are based on the insights which are gained from the data. By analyzing the historical inspection data and identifying these factors, which can be, let's say, predictive of deficiencies or the non-compliances, it may be possible for us to develop a predictive model to identify high-risk sites or high-risk programs or high-risk products that may require more increased scrutiny. By analyzing the inspection data, it may be possible to identify inefficiencies or the bottlenecks which are there in the inspection process, and which can be, let's say, addressed in order to improve the efficiency and the effectiveness of the inspection process. Furthermore, the data analytics can support data driven decision making rather than relying solely on the institution or simply relying on our past experiences. The organizations can leverage this data to inform and to identify decision making processes. The data analytics, it provides a quantitative foundation for these decision making. It enables the businesses to make very informed choices based on the objective evidences and based on the insights which can be derived from these analysis.
Let's look at a little more in terms of what are the types of data analysis that we can look at. Data analytics and techniques include various models, such as statistical analysis, data mining, machine learning, predictive modeling, text mining, and more. But these techniques, they can be applied to structured data, ideally spreadsheets, if you may, and databases, of course, as well as unstructured data, that is text documents, social media posts, and whatever else that you can think of in terms of that. And the choice of technique depends on the nature of the data and the specific objectives of the analysis. So, when we are looking at it, various approaches to data analytics can be looked at, and some of them could be descriptive analysis, why something happened, for example. Diagnostic analysis, as it says here, this describes what has happened over a given period of time and have, for example, have the number of findings gone up in a particular period of time, and why have a particular type of findings gone up, and so on. This type of analysis, involves summarizing and describing data to provide insights into what has happened in the past in the context of inspection data analysis. Descriptive analysis could be used to summarize the types of frequencies of deficiencies, for example, or observations identified during inspection, and the number of critical findings, for example, in a given period, or the types of deficiencies identified across different inspections. The diagnostic analysis, again, coming back to that, this focuses more on why something happened. As I said earlier, this involves more diverse data inputs and bit of hypothesizing, if you may. Did the change in regulation impact the number of findings? Did the change in processes impact it? Have the change in processes have had an impact in terms of the timing when the changes in process have been brought, and so on. So that's more of a diagnostic analysis. And this type of analysis involves examining data to understand why something happened or what factors contributed to a particular outcome in the context of that inspection data analysis. Diagnostic analysis can be used to identify root causes of deficiencies or observations identified during inspections. And using as an example, examining the underlying reasons why a particular process or a system failed, and why did it fail, essentially, to meet regulatory requirement. Looking a little bit at the predictive analysis, this one is looking at what is likely going to happen. This is kind of like gazing into the future. Or it's not literally looking at a crystal ball, but this type of analysis will be backed by the data that makes these predictions about future outcomes potentially. In the context of inspection data analysis, predictive analysis could be used to identify areas of potential risk for future inspections based on trends or patterns in the past data. Using, again, as an example, identifying which areas of the clinical trial process are more likely to be the focus of regulatory inspections based on the trend that we have seen. The prescriptive analysis, let's look at that a little more in detail. This suggests a course of action. This type of analysis involves using data to make recommendations or prescribe actions to achieve a particular outcome. In the context of inspection data analysis, prescriptive analysis could be used to develop targeted corrective action or risk mitigation strategies to address deficiencies or observations identified during inspections. Again, using an example, identifying specific process improvements or staff training needs, for example, to address deficiencies in clinical trial processes.
Now, once, let's say we have our data that we need to analyze, the process or the method for doing the data analysis, it is a very strategic approach, and it involves a step-by-step process. The first important step will be to kind of group our data and to determine our data requirements. The data, let's say, can be separated by age, demographic, income, or gender, or the data values may be numerical, or it can be divided by the category. Let's say in the case of inspection findings, this data can be categorized based upon the area. It may be, the GCP related inspection findings or the GMP related inspection findings, or it can be categorized even in terms of the classification of these findings, whether they were critical, major, or minor. So the second step in the data analytics is the process of collecting it. This can be done through variety of sources such as your computers, online sources, or the websites, as we spoke in case of inspection findings before. Once we have our data, it is required to be organized in a way that it can be analyzed, and this may take place on a spreadsheet or any other form of softwares as well. The data is then cleaned up before the analysis. This means it is scrubbed and checked to ensure that there are no duplications, there are no errors, the data is complete, it is within the specific data requirements that we have defined. This step, it helps to correct any errors before it goes on to a data analyst who's going to use some sort of softwares or some sort of techniques in order to analyze this data.
Let us look at some of these methods, so the background that Loveleen provided, and that could be applied to any of these methods. And statistical analysis is a very common method that we see. And, this, as the name suggests, it helps to monitor the industry performance and, identify areas of improvement essentially. But this analysis actually aids in data summarization, kind of trend identification, hypothesis testing, predictive modeling. This is like an all-encompassing high-level statistical analysis that you can do. You can do comparative analysis, you can do confidence interval estimation, and look at all the regulatory authority and inspected organizations data and derive valuable insights, making informed decisions and prioritize your actions based on that. So the second type, and this is probably the most commonly seen in the MHRA, as well as, I'm not able to click this. Okay, as well as, I think clicked on the wrong one. There we go. So the frequency analysis is perhaps the most common one that we see in most of the regulatory reports that we see. The aggregated reports that we saw about inspections, we talked about EMA and MHRA publishing those. This method it can be used to identify areas where there are recurring problems. For example, if a frequency analysis shows that there is a high number of inspection observations related to a particular area, for example, non-compliance to protocol, or oversight of inadequate oversight of investigator, data integrity issues. This could indicate that there is problem in that particular area and so on. But most commonly used frequency analysis, this is one of the means of doing it. The other means of doing it, another method of doing analysis is control measures. This method can be used to develop and implement controls to address problems identified through frequency, trend, root cause, and risk assessment. So it's kind of one level up from frequency analysis. You have all that data from frequency analysis. What do? You put together what we call control measures. You put together tolerance limits. You put together aspects of how these control methods can be developed and implemented, to provide adequate cover for essentially the area of non-compliance that has been identified. So that's probably the most key aspect here. When you're looking at addressing the problem of high number of inspection observations in a particular area. Here we have used an example of data integrity, as you can see. The next method of data analytics is risk assessment. And where can we build this, and how can we build this one? This method can be used to assess the likelihood and impact of problems identified through frequency, trend, and root cause again. And in this case, the risk assessment shows that the high number of inspection observations related to, for example, a data integrity would then mean that that is a high level risk area, and that is the area where we want to focus on. And this methodology kind of gives you the opportunity to prioritize what items are being provided as outputs from your analysis. Let's look at the next piece here, which is trend analysis. And in this method, in trend analysis, again, as the name suggests, we are identifying patterns, and we are looking at inspection observations over a period of time, and we are looking at different patterns. So we have enough data to look at, and we look at how the trend has been for a particular type of an aspect within the non-compliances. So here we will be looking at number of inspection observations related to a particular area, whether it's been increasing, decreasing. It's slightly different from the frequency, because the frequency talks about how often it has appeared, but here we are looking at more in terms of what the trend has been for this. Has it been increasing? Has it been decreasing? What it means to better processes? What it means to change in regulations? What does it mean in terms of overall compliance levels and such? That's what this one will focus on in terms of trend analysis. The other methodology that we can adopt is the root cause analysis. And here in the root cause analysis method, this method can be used to identify, again, the underlying cause of problems, as the name suggests. So figuring out what the root cause is through frequency and trend analysis. So you're using the previous two, and then you're trying to understand which piece of the puzzle gives you the answer towards the root causes. And the root cause analysis shows what the high number of inspection observations related to data integrity. Has it been due to example of having inadequate training for staff, or is it a new process? Is it a new system that has been introduced? Is it a switch from a one existing electronic system to a new electronic system where the data integrity controls are a lot more stringent, a lot more different, and require a double authentication or some measures of that sort which have not been adequately identified, things like that. So you could figure out all sorts of root causes by doing these multi-analysis as indicated. Looking at text mining and sentiment analysis, and this one, we are borrowing this from the world of marketing, and they tend to do a lot of this in terms of what is being said, what is the actual words that are being used, and by this, the text mining and sentiment analysis is used to extract structured data from these reports, and then identify whether there is something that has been said which is very key. So when I was reading out the citations from the slide earlier on, I was talking specifically about the fact that these words are giving us a lot more insight into what it means. So you could run a word search across all the data that's available and just identify how many times this word has been included in that particular section of inspection findings, and you'll be surprised that it will show up so many more number of times than the actual findings itself. So that means to say that text and that sentiment perhaps could be analyzed in a manner and then incorporated into your own processes for improvements and such. Geospatial analysis, again, this one, trying to look at it from multiple aspects. One is from the regulators, so cross comparing regulatory data across 2 regulators, 3 regulators in different geographies, and seeing how they are kind of codifying their observations, whether they are aligned to a particular type of codification in one geography versus the next, which geography or which regulatory authority is calling out a particular type of inspection observations more than another, and how does one measure up against others in terms of numbers purely, and such. We could do all of that, as well as look at it purely from another context where the most non-compliances are occurring. And if your program, if your study, if your manufacturing facility falls within that geographical area, then you'd be looking at, oh, these seem to be a common aspect around that. Is this something that we could look at strengthening within our process, within our program, within our manufacturing entity there, and so on. And so those are the things, kind of geospatial analysis, that can be performed as well. We could be looking at network analysis, and this network analysis is by analyzing the relationship between different sites, different programs, and trying to build a network across everything that you have within your own ecosystem versus what you have from the regulatory inspection databases, and then looking at potential sources of non-compliances, areas of risks, and see what kind of insights that it will provide, and look at it from a perspective of how can you look at identifying higher incidence of certain activities, maybe cluster of products, companies with high incidence of deficiencies and such, and cross-compare it against what your data, your internal audit data says as well. So this could be another way of doing a network analysis in that sense. And last but not the least, and of course, being very, very popular nowadays, trying to use technology in many ways, use machine learning and predictive modeling, to identify patterns, relationships in large data sets, and try to identify high-risk items from that, high-risk aspects from that, and kind of build a model which could identify which factors are predictive and how these non-compliances can be addressed by mitigating some of these aspects ahead of time. So that's what we wanted to kind of represent by showing our different methods of data analytics. Each organization uses more than one of these methods, and many organizations use all of these. Some of them use few of these. Some of them use more complex data analytics than these. But it could be a contributor to providing insights in many ways by using a mix of these, a right mix of these for your situation and your scenario, essentially. Let's look at perhaps a example of what data analytics has done, and this is I am quoting a article which was published in the Therapeutic Innovation and Regulatory Sciences in 2022. This is a descriptive analysis of good clinical practice inspection findings from US FDA and EMA, and this gentleman is one of the inspectors from the US FDA who has put this together, and it is an article which is using one of the techniques of analysis called the descriptive analysis. And descriptive analysis is a type of data analysis that summarizes data in a way that makes it easy to understand. It can be used to describe the characteristics of population. It is used to identify trends and to compare different groups, essentially. So that's what they have done. The article analyzed inspection findings from FDA and EMA between 2016 and 2020. The analysis found that the most common inspection findings were related to informed consent, subject safety, and data integrity. The article also found that the number of inspection findings increased over time, and that the FDA was more likely to issue a major deficiency rather than the EMA. By that we mean that there was more OAIs coming from FDA in this instance. The data actually included 26 clinical investigator sites and 23 sponsor contract research organizations inspected by both agencies, and this was in support of 31 marketing authorization applications during that period. The authors in this article, the wonderful regulatory scientists who put this data together, have actually used some standardization of terminologies and across the deficiencies identified by the regulators. The authors have also grouped some of these deficiencies in special buckets, making it easy to perform the analysis. With this as an example, it's important to note that by utilizing more intuitive and standardized terms, stakeholders can better comprehend and address the identified deficiencies. This not only facilitates communication and understanding better from regulatory authorities and inspected organizations as such, but it also kind of gives you an insight into how this analysis can be performed and what the outcomes of this would be. So it's interesting to note that when they actually performed this analysis, when they did this, the combining of these some of these findings and in some buckets, and kind of renaming those deficiency areas and such, it just showed how different each of these regulatory agencies was reporting. So when you're doing your analytics, you utilize the information that this particular paper is providing to make sure that you code your data in a manner that it can be much more easily analyzed by looking at like for like more so. So sorry, I talked through all of this. My apologies for that. But yeah, ideally these were the two aspects that was that were included in terms of the common investigator sites issues that were identified, common sponsor issues that were identified in that particular paper, and also the statistics that was utilized as well. It's a very interesting paper, and I think we have provided a link here, or I don't know if there is a link here or not, but you could put this in the in your scientific journal search, and I believe it is a free journal that you can have access to. Let us now look at a little bit of output of the analysis that is performed. We talked a lot about how it is to be analyzed. Let's look at what the outputs of analysis are. We have a few more slides to go, so I will hand it over to Lovely now.
So as a part of a data analysis, the general outputs which can be expected from such sort of analysis are shown in the slide. The first one being the identification of the higher risk sites or the products. Now, by analyzing the inspection data, it is very much possible for us to identify the sites or products which are having higher likelihood of non-compliance or the deficiencies. And this information can very well be used to prioritize our internal audit program. It can help us to develop the targeted interventions to address the specific risk factors. The second one being the identification of common deficiencies or trends. As you can see, what Milind was showing in the previous slide as one of the example, by doing that sort of an analysis, they identified the common areas of deficiencies across the investigator sites were related to the protocol non-compliance, and the common areas of deficiencies for the sponsor or the CROs was found to be trial management. Now, by doing our analysis, it is possible to identify these common areas and or the areas of the weakness, and then this can be used to develop targeted quality improvement initiatives, or to have training programs which are very specific for these deficiency areas. It can also be used for the recommendations for the process optimization. By analyzing the inspection data, it is possible to identify the bottlenecks or the inefficiencies in the regulatory inspection process. And this information can be used to develop recommendations for the process optimization, or to identify where additional resources or the trainings that can be required. It can be used for benchmarking and comparison. By comparing the inspection data across different regions or the regulatory bodies, it is very much possible for us to identify the differences in the regulatory requirements or enforcement practices. And then this can be used by us to ensure compliance with the regulatory standards across the multiple markets, or to advocate for the changes in the regulatory requirements. As Milind talked about the predictive modeling before as well, by using the predictive models or the risk scoring systems, we can identify high risk programs before an inspection takes place. We can identify high risk sites or high risk products, and then we can use this information to prioritize our regulatory inspection preparation according to that, and we can develop the targeted interventions to address the specific risk factors as well.
Let's look at some specific outputs. What could be the specific outputs from such an analysis? And some of these, of course, we have touched upon earlier, but let's just kind of summarize it here. So we can look at frequency analysis. That could be one of the output. You're looking at frequency clearly. The types of deficiencies, specific types of deficiencies, and you're looking at how often they are coming through, and so on. So there's that. The second one being severity of observations and deficiencies. So you're looking at codifying some of those non-compliances, some of those deficiencies against what kind of severity they've been sitting at. How many major observations were identified for data integrity controls? How many minor were identified? What does it mean? Is there a trend that we can look at, and so on? So we'll be looking at that specific output from this analysis. Then comparison of inspection outcomes across different regions, as I said, and regulatory bodies. That could be a specific output that will be very, very crucial if you're working across multiple geographies for your developmental program, or working across multiple markets for your as a multinational company. And that would mean it is important that you try to do this comparison across the regulatory information that you're getting across different regions and from different regulatory bodies, and try to assess it to make sure that your processes, your systems are aligned. The fourth item there is identifying high risk sites and products. That's we touched upon this from this point a few times. It's easy to identify which are the high risk items by looking at the trends that you're seeing. So if you look at perhaps there is a very high incidence of having major observations coming out of clinical sites that have had previous observations, and then this is the second time time that they are being inspected and they are getting more significant observations the second time and such, so you will know that, okay, this is where we need to focus on and so on. And then of course, predictive modeling and risk scoring. Sorry, it's a bit repetitive at certain places in the way that we are looking at it, but these are the outputs that you're looking at in terms of identifying what would help for you from an analysis of such sort. This next slide, I want to talk through all of this, and just talking about what are the advantages of such an analysis and why are we using it. And so essentially all those 5 items there. So it is a very structured methodology is what I would like to start with. So it kind of this serves as a methodology to explain the performance of processes, and by applying analytical techniques, organizations can gain deeper insights into how their processes are functioning. It allows them to examine the underlying factors, for example, that contribute to the success or failure, and that this knowledge could be crucial in making all sorts of informed decisions which drive improvements. Again, these are ideal to compare and present situations with expected ones is the second advantage that I've written. Essentially, what we are talking about is, we are talking about benchmarking. This is ideal for comparing of the situations present, situations expected, situations in the past, and so on. And then by setting these benchmarks and utilizing analytical tools, then your organization can then measure the performance against what are the predetermined targets. This is almost like goal setting versus what's expected by the industry standards versus what is being seen in the inspection metrics, essentially. So you could do that sort of an analysis, and that would be the advantage that you're looking at. Also looking at strengths and weaknesses within your process. With all the outputs that we explained earlier, it's much easier to identify what your strengths and weaknesses are by kind of overlapping all the outputs that you have versus what the process deficiencies or process improvements and process strengths that you already know. So it can be easy to identify where you sit, where it's kind of giving you a self-assessment progress card, if you may, in terms of where you're sitting. It will also help you in terms of your continuous improvement possibilities, and know where to create what new processes need to be built, what new controls need to be built, and so on. And last but not the least, but brings in clarity of responsibilities for all stakeholders who are responsible for performing these activities, essentially. So to kind of summarize this, the analysis that we talked about offers several advantages in evaluating process performance, and it provides a methodology to explain performances, enables comparison with expected outcomes, and identifies strengths and weaknesses, and so on. And this is going to be our last one, and we are talking about an end note, as I said. In conclusion, inspection findings are used by both regulatory authorities, inspection entities, and essentially, organizations that help other organizations put together aspects towards inspection readiness and so on as well. And these in several ways are useful to work towards how they can be utilized. And firstly, inspection findings, remember, that serve as a basis for regulatory action by the relevant regulatory authority. And if significant non-compliance or deficiencies are identified, the regulatory authorities may take actions. That's things including warning letters, enforcement actions, fines, penalties, revoking licenses, and so on. The improvement of compliance is the second item that we have listed there, which is it gives you valuable feedback to the inspected entities, such as most organizations, helping them identify areas of non-compliance, weaknesses in their quality systems, opportunities for improvement. And these findings serve as a guide for implementing corrective and preventative actions to rectify deficiencies in their own system and enhance compliance with regulatory requirements. When you read an inspection report and you realize, oh, this is what they found in that other organization, we don't have this control, perhaps we should go and fix it. That nicely rolls into the next piece that we are talking about in terms of quality system enhancement. This one is, again, this findings, like I said, will give you adequate information that will be crucial to improve your quality systems, and it will help you identify all those areas where there could be non-compliances, gaps in procedure, shortcomings, etc. It, as I indicated earlier, it also helps in all of these go hand in hand and try to understand the risk and mitigation of those risks. overall giving you more confidence, or rather, more giving your organization a better picture in terms of the eyes of the public, which gives more confidence and transparency to them. And last but not the least, you can see that the inspection findings contribute to giving in all the possible knowledge that you can have, and sharing that learning within the industry, and trying to understand how that can better processes internally. So that's on that end note, I think.
Fantastic. That was the end of that presentation, and I've got 1 minute before the last presentation of day 2. Just talk about this year's RQA conference. We're coming from Belfast this year, between the 1st and the 3rd of November. RiverArc, who you've just heard, we're one of the gold sponsors, and we're now about to turn our attention to another gold sponsor in Master Control, a long partner of ours on our conferences. So the next presentation is 3 Steps to Compete in Digital Quality, by Kevin Ballard of Master Control. Again, this was taken from our virtual conference, which preparation for next May will start in due course, I think, as we put this conference to bed in the next 9 weeks, and we'll start with our virtual one. So if you're seeing these presentations and you think you'd like to be involved, then there'll be an abstract process for that in due course. So by all means, if you haven't booked the conference, take a look at the website. It's all on there. Early bird finishes tomorrow, so you save yourself at least £110 if you book before the end of tomorrow. So we're going to go on to the last presentation. I'm just going to unshare my screen, and here we go. I'll come back at the end.
Sorry, thank you very much. I apologize. It's always an adventure, even after multiple years of remote work and presentations and meetings, to get Zoom and presentations to work. So I appreciate everyone's patience. I'm really excited to be here with this amazing group of quality professionals. Excited to be able to present some of Master Control's findings on how to compete in digital quality maturity. I'm based in Utah. Right now it is a little after 6:30 in the morning. So that's how excited I am. I got up really early for this, and just look forward to this next set of sessions. A little bit about myself. My name is Kevin Ballard. I currently work for Master Control as a senior product manager. I've been in quality and software for over 20 years, filling various roles, including software quality manager, director of software validation, director of software engineering. Been around this a lot, very familiar with many of the struggles that quality professionals face, both in regulatory software and other professional arenas. What I'm going to cover today is quality management maturity. Master Control recently did some exclusive research on this, both on the current state of the industry and creating some guidance on how companies and individuals can both assess their current digital maturity and steps they can take to increase their quality maturity. So those are our key takeaways. We'll cover 3 steps to compete. Vision, right? As you're working to increase and improve your maturity, how do you maximize the benefits of the journey? How can you overcome blockers, and what's really kind of out there in the future for quality? First, I think it's important to do a quick level set. You'll hear a lot of terms thrown around, things like digital maturity, quality maturity, digital quality, quality transformation, quality management maturity. They all relate to the same thing. I'm going to use them fairly synonymously and interchangeably here. But there is some nuance out there, but I just kind of want to level set so as to kind of make sure there's no confusion. So as part of that, one of the key phrases is quality management maturity. And so the question is, what is that? Now, I'll emphasize that this slide notes the FDA specifically, but over recent years, probably especially since COVID, but certainly it began a little bit before, regulatory agencies and quality societies all around the world have been quite focused on increasing quality. And so as quality professionals, right, we're always focused on increasing quality. So that's a little bit of a misnomer, but and the regulatory agencies have really emphasized the need for quality and protecting patient health and things like that. But we're starting to see action around from the regulatory agencies to kind of provide guidance or even codify what that means. So for quality management maturity specifically, that's a model for exceeding current CGMP regulations. CGMP was intended to kind of standardize good manufacturing processes, brings quality through that standardization, but they're finding that, or they're desiring at least to increase the quality beyond what those regulations are. QMM, quality management maturity, I'm just going to call it QMM. It's a state of consistent, reliable, and robust business processes to achieve quality objectives and promote continual improvement. So that's saying we're improving our processes, continuous improvement, we're all familiar with that, and putting things in place so that we don't get to a level of quality and stay there, but to try and ensure that we're continuously improving. The FDA specifically is putting together a multidisciplinary, multi-center working group to develop tools, policies, assessments, things like that. States of quality, as I mentioned, are at different levels of quality maturity. Yesterday's plenary session emphasized that quality and digital transformation is really a journey. There's not really a point where you say, we've arrived, we are 100% quality, right? There's always going to be things to work on and things to improve. Similarly, digitalization, moving our processes to the digital world, are also at different levels of maturity. That digitalization is going to be a key component of QMM efforts. And even at some point, the scales of maturity are changing as technology evolves, right? And we're seeing that right now with ChatGPT, where perhaps once we thought artificial intelligence may be out of reach for our particular companies or enterprises, ChatGPT has shown that technology is no longer so far out of reach. In fact, it's maybe a much closer reality than we thought. So with that level set, I'd like to get into some of the research that Master Control has done on the current state of digital quality maturity. So for this research, we interviewed over 150 quality leaders in life sciences. This was a full representation of life sciences industry, multiple industries, companies of all sizes, and key markets around the world. So it is targeted to life sciences, but the findings can be applied even beyond that area. Here is some of the original, some of the research, some of the findings that we had. Mass Control, though we have 30 years of experience in the life sciences QMS market, some of the findings surprised us a little bit. What you can see here, this shows how high of a priority it is across industries and company sizes to improve their digital quality maturity. So this really isn't a surprise. For many industries, and especially life sciences, but across the industry, one of the things that that we're still contending with is paper-based processes and paper documentation. And so there's almost no one that's exempt from that, that's fully digital. And so you can see across industry, medical device, pharmaceutical, biologics, biotech, their digitization is their highest priority. And if it's not their highest, it is one of the many priorities. So, you know, even the lowest there is 95%. Digitalization is a key priority and a key need for their companies. Company size, small, intermediate, large, very large, you can see where their prioritization is for their digital initiatives as well. Companies are focused on this. They see it as a way to secure a competitive advantage, and rightly so. Diving a little bit more into the research, here are some of the surprises we found. If you look at that top graph, while over 85% of those we interviewed do have some form of electronic quality management system, paper is still, manual or paper-based processes is still their highest pain point by far. And that surprised us a little bit. Moving to the graph on the right, the most digitized process is QEM, their quality event management, but it's still only fully digital for about half of their respondents. And so when I say there's almost no company that's exempt from manual or paper processes, this kind of shows just how much of a struggle paper-based still is, and what we're trying to accomplish. Now this could be a function of low implementation. In that bottom graph, you can see that only less than a third of organizations have a QMS implemented at all their sites. One takeaway is for those who have started to implement a QMS, or increasing their implementation can be an easy win for companies. And there's obviously struggles with that and things we need to do. But if you already have a QMS in place in one of your sites, increasing that across your sites could be very helpful. What this does show, though, is well, many enterprises may assume that they're behind the industry in digitalization. This actually shows that there is a lot of room for organizations to invest and create real differentiation through digitalization against their competitors. How to get there can be difficult, and so we need a model to map it. And so Mass Control's created this model We call this the maturity model that shows the journey for digitalization. Obviously, at the beginning is manual processes, paper-based. Then there's digitalization, where you've digitized your core processes and core documentation. Beyond that is connected, where your SOPs are tied to your training system. You have automation in place to help connect all that together. And then beyond that is intelligent. That's the maturity model. I'm going to dive now into what is our current state and our perceptions on our digital maturity. As I mentioned before, 58% of the companies we spoke to said their primary reason for wanting to become more digital is to increase their competitive advantage. Beyond that, FDA and other regulatory agencies, as I said, continue to focus on quality maturity as a way to improve overall quality and focus on risk-based decision-making. And as those regulatory bodies develop these frameworks, organizations that are able to remain, to get ahead of the curve and stay in front of those regulations will have an obvious benefit. I'm going to kind of gloss over this a little bit. I think some of these elements are somewhat self-explanatory, but just diving a little bit into the different tiers from the model we created. The digital tier, as I mentioned, the purpose is to reduce or eliminate paper, automate the processes, connect quality across documents, training, quality events, and gain real-time access to data and insights. Those are some of the benefits that come from the digital tier that can be used as you make the case for moving along that digital journey, that quality management journey. Connected, benefits of moving then to the connected tier. Real-time access to quality data and insights, improved efficiency, automation of processes, better utilization of human capital and resources. We know that manual processes are labor intensive and prone to errors. Digitalization and connecting the digital systems together allows human capital to be utilized in more creative and more profitable efforts. This level really is about making quality a focus for the entire organization, rather than just having a QMS that's there and available to use. Connecting really emphasizes that, hey, quality is where we're headed. Finally, the intelligent tier. We've heard about ChatGPT and artificial intelligence, machine learning. The benefits of this, when you get to it, are minimizing human error with improved decision support. We've seen some of the news about how machine learning and those tools can help improve assessments, diagnoses, decision-making, things like that. Improving root cause assessments, as I already mentioned. No matter the level of maturity, manual to digital, digital to connected, connected to intelligent, the themes are consistent: efficiency, focus on data, and improving quality. For those who are on the journey, there are blockers. Obviously, number one blocker that we found is price of new systems. Number two is the time necessary to transition your current system and training. Really, the key to overcoming these is performing an ROI analysis, viewing those benefits, trying to quantify them, and measuring them against the cost or the perceived cost. If you can find a software solution that has a lot of experience, knows how to implement and upgrade this process, that can really help make this easier so that you're not reinventing the wheel, creating your own systems, trying to go it alone. Having a good, solid partner really can help overcome these blockers quite effectively. Preparing for the future. This is really an important slide that I want to emphasize. I mentioned that our perception of where we stand in the industry may not be accurate. So at the top, you can see the actual current state of the industry. 12% of the companies we surveyed are still fully manual. 61% have some sort of digitalization in place. 24% say they're connected, and 2% say they're intelligent. We asked also those companies where they thought the rest of the industry was. And so you can see here, they thought that the rest of the industry was only 10% manual, only 39% digital in the digital tier, with 27% connected and a whole 14% intelligent. So we perceive that the rest of the industry is much farther along this maturity journey than we are. But again, if you look at that current state, that's not the case, which means that there is a lot of room for us as quality professionals and for our organizations to move along that journey and gain that competitive advantage. We're not really playing from as far behind as we think. And in fact, many of us are farther ahead than we know. Future quality maturity. This was also part of our research. Large majorities of the companies we surveyed are looking to make at least a 1-level jump within 5 years. 17% likely to move from manual to digital in 5 years. Digital to connected, 77% said they had plans or anticipated that they would be moving to the connected tier within 5 years. And then 50% were anticipating making an intelligence digital move within 5 years. Very interesting. This is just a high level, again, of the research we've done. The report that we created from this research and an assessment that you can do to measure your place in the journey on that quality management maturity are both available at this URL. These slides will be available. So if you can't catch this while I speak, but you can go there, do an assessment, download the report, and start to see where you are and make the case for continuing to move along, onward and upward on the quality maturity model.
Okay, that was the last presentation of today. Thanks to everyone who is still with us. So I think we're up to a high number we've got now. So if you've remained for the last 3 hours, thank you. If you're here and you wonder what you missed, I believe when I stop this stream, eventually it will play from the start. So if you're watching it on the RQA website, then that video will stay there for now. So you can go back and have a look at anything you missed. Again, this was a recap of presentations from our sponsors from this year's conference, which the early bird finishes for tomorrow. The link is in the chat. Go and have a look at the program. Come and join over 300 of your colleagues in Belfast in November. We hope to see you. I'll be back next week with some more streaming, I think, in some vein. Good morning.